Ladies and gentlemen, the program will begin in 10 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The program is about to begin.
I didn't know I was perfect. I was wrong all the time. Always wanting more. Why? I kept on stumble and falter. Try to keep it sane, but it was all a lie. Why? Oh, where we go? Now I am feeling my loving. I am no longer the same. I am a queen I can conquer. No longer playing a game. Now I am over the struggle. Now that the feeling is true. Now I believe in my future. No longer cut in two. Now I try to be patient, keep a quiet mind, get out of the madness, try to be here in the moment, breathe for a while, let go of the past, try, where we go, now I am feeling my loving.
Please welcome Brad Bow and Katie Thompson.
All right, hi everyone. Should I go up there? Hey, Katie.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Quite the dramatic entrance. I love it.
Thank you. Hopefully that make your afternoon at least to start with fun.
Yes. So, Brad, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it. A lot going on right now in the scooter space. So excited to have you.
My pleasure. Good to have you here.
Yes, thank you. You started Lime 2 years ago.
Yeah, a little bit shy of 2 years. We started January 2017.
Right. And since then, you've launched in 80 countries, in 140 markets.
Yeah, 18.
No, 18.
Yeah, 18.
Sorry.
Sorry.
And you, I believe, I understand, at least almost 25 million rides in
Yep.
less than 2 years.
Yes.
That's pretty impressive. So we've seen this scooter trend really take off globally across the world. And I want to get your insight and what you think is the one thing that's sort of pushing this trend forward.
Yeah, I think there are many reasons for this phenomenon trend, but if there's one thing I want to point to is efficiency. That efficiency we provide the user to save time and save money so they can live more. And also efficiency that applies to, in addition to shock then, and also my background, that really goes to that what are the best, most efficient energy, efficient as well as fast and cheapest way to get around the city. And that's, bike used to be my main form of transportation. Even after I moved to the US, I bike or scooter everywhere I can. And I think that is, then we're gonna ask ourselves the question is that, do we really need a car all the time? Or that we just, culturally, that perception-wise, that we think we need it. Mm-hmm. And that also, in addition to the other aspect is the emotion attachment. For me, that, biking around and scooter around is another way to really further explore the city, explore the communities, and it's sociable, right? You smell at the people around you, you engage with them, and you see the stuff that you would otherwise never be able to explore if you were in a car. So that two parts as of together, and with the global trend of urbanization and global trend of the the pollutions or that, I think really generates further thinking of how do we see the future transportation will be. And it's not only that China is known for as the kingdom of bicycles or that, but then if we look at the cities in Europe, right? Amsterdam, Copenhagen, and all the cities that around the globe that alternative transportation has been a very significant part of that. Whereas in the US, that as we all know is less than 1% of the total transportation.
But you're not just looking though at scooters, right? I
No.
mean, you're looking at a range of different vehicles.
That's right, yeah.
So you've experimented or started to experiment with pod cars, I believe?
Yeah, we call it pod.
In Seattle. And why, I guess, and what other sort of vehicles might you be looking at or services?
Yeah, we as a company, we never see ourselves as a bike company or scooter company. We started with the pedal bikes, and then 6 months later, we added e-bikes. 6 months later, that we added scooters, and now 6 months later, that we added car share. That I think what we focus on is modernized urban transportation, and there's no one-size-catch-all. And what it means is that user has different needs, different user cases. It's our responsibility to provide the most convenient, accessible, and affordable way of transportation whenever, however, and wherever they need it. So that's how we look at the whole thing. And then pod thing that, all the car share or the ride shares has, the legacy of private-owned cars. Namely that if you want to buy one car, that it has to be, one-size-catch-all. So it's all 7-seaters or 5-seaters. Whereas in the urban mobility, kind of a scenario, that user don't need it. So we're testing with like 1-seater or 2-seater, much smaller cars. Again, that are cost-effective, much more cost-efficient, as well as take much less public space, and it will be shared. So that's another way that for us to add more options for the user to get around.
And as you kind of grow and expand into these new areas, what do you see for your company going forward? Do you see you remaining independent, or maybe there was a report that came out last week that Uber was looking to acquire a scooter company, Bird and Lime were both mentioned, becoming part of a bigger company and being able to take advantage of their resources? Yeah,
I think we're very flattered to be part of the speculation or rumors all along. Right? This is not the first time. This probably is not the last time. But for us, that we focus on building an independent company and the product and service that we think we're best positioned to provide to the users, as well as we think that the vision that we have is fairly unique, and we want to focus on building that.
So you're also, you have a history of firsts, right? When we were talking, you mentioned very casually that you were one of the first civilians in China to go bungee jumping. You were in the first undergrad class, I believe, to get a marketing degree. And with Lime, you've kind of shown that you're not afraid of taking chances and being first to market, et cetera. But with that comes risk and trial and error, and something that has repeatedly come up since this boom in scooters has been safety concerns, right?
That's right.
And we've seen reports of injuries, users experience injuries, and not only that, but the safety of the scooters themselves. Lime experienced 2 recalls, I believe, recently in November.
That's right. Yeah.
So I would love for you to tell me, what are 3 things that you're doing, that Lime is doing to help ensure that its users are safe?
Yeah, I think safety is the most important thing to us as a company, and in particularly we're in the transportation business, that the safety issues is inherently that it will be existing. And the matter to us is that really in a few folds, right? The first is that as a company, what are our responsibilities and how do we help the user and cities and community to improve safeties? I would have pointed to 3 things that we do. The first is that keep on iterating our hardware and the software to keep making it much safer for the user to use. The analogy that I used, which I really like, is on the cars, the safety feature like ABS system, right? We don't even notice it's existing, but it helps the user to steer away from the dangers or safety concerns. And that didn't exist when car was invented, but gradually that the car manufacturer did a good job adding more and more feature to it. I think that we as a company, we fully committed on that. And the scooter I rode in, as you probably can see, maybe some of you didn't see the details, is the 4th iteration of our scooter, which we developed in the course of 11 months. And the 4th iteration that has much bigger wheels, wider tires, and full suspension on the front, and a much more sturdy build. And those are the features that we listen to the users, and we take that all in and improve our hardware to make it much safer. And that is compared to all the other companies out there that I think that you can see that we already released 4 different versions, keep on improving. And the second part of that, excuse me, is with the new hardware, we wanted to bring the level of safety standard higher, right, to the industry. And the second thing we're doing is user education. I think that in all the transportations, that 70% plus of the accidents was the result from human errors. And our responsibility as a company is how we help to educate the user, safety tips, how to use the devices, and how do we make sure that we minimize the errors. And that part that we just launched a safety campaign called Respect the Right. And as a young company, we devoted $3 million in order to run it effectively. And the third thing I would point to is technology. That I think technology plays such a significant role in our everyday now, right? The everyday life, and how we use technology to further improve it. One of the examples is we have the dynamic speed limit on all the vehicles. When it gets to school zones, that you automatically slower down the speed to 12 miles an hour. And when it comes to even crowded pedestrian-heavy regions, that will slow down to 8 miles per hour. And when it comes to some of the places, will reduce and even lock it, like user cannot ride it. For example, in Santa Monica on the boardwalk. So those are the things we're doing, but there are a lot more, right? We have the safety and trust committees working on user safety as well.
Yeah, and specifically when you talk about technology and how that can help make these vehicles more safe, what are some features that are upcoming, perhaps, or that you're looking at that you haven't implemented yet? So I know you talked about like you're in the school zone, it might go down to a certain thing. That's something that you already have.
Yeah.
So what is something looking ahead next year, next 2 years, that might be another safety feature coming to market?
Yeah, I think there are a lot we're still working on, and technology, given the matureness and the testing and the iterations, will gradually introduce more safety features to both on the hardware and the software. Some of the examples that, as I mentioned, in addition to the speed limit, that we're testing and balancing whether the scooter and bike can be self-balancing to make sure that it's less resulting in less human errors. And there are other things we're also looking at, like sidewalk detection, right? That how do we prevent not only increasing the safeties for the rider itself, but also increase the safety for the pedestrians that's around the riders. And one of the features we're working on is sidewalk detections. How we can detect that the user is riding on the sidewalk, and we limited that kind of behavior.
Very cool. And something that we talked about a little bit off the cuff, breathalyzers perhaps coming to scooters. Is that a possibility?
Sorry, what?
Like an alcohol test on the...
Yeah. I think it's not the breath meter that we will use. We're probably using more AIs and algorithms to detect whether users' behavior is abnormal.
Oh, wow. Okay, very cool. And I touched on this a little bit earlier, but there's sort of a scooter war going on right now, right? You've got Bird, Uber is an investor in you guys, Jump. You see traditional automakers getting into the space. Ford, I believe, bought a scooter company. So what is the one thing that you guys are doing to make yourself different, to really stand out against the competition? Like, what advantage do you guys have?
Yeah, I think the one key thing I would point to is, well, there, if you don't mind, I think were 2 things. That first is multimodal kind of offerings, that we're the only company has the bikes, the e-bikes, and scooters, and the car share. That we didn't design the company around one product, but it's more around the users. What the user need at different in different weathers at different time of the day and for different reasons. So that differentiates us from other companies focusing on one single product. And the other thing is technology innovations. That I think we have Ryan from Jump on the stage yesterday talking about hardware innovations or that, right? And we're one that are much more advanced on that. That for the bikes, we iterate 7 to 8 iterations within a year, incorporate all the feedbacks and then enhance the safeties. And we're doing the same thing for the scooters, and we're going to do that with the Lime Pod as well. That will further set us apart, by providing better riding experience, much more safer ride, as well as the advanced feature that help the city.
Another issue that's come up with the rise of scooters is the backlash from cities, right?
Yep.
I believe today Madrid was the latest city to basically halt all scooter companies within the city. So how are you addressing this issue, and what are you trying to work on to improve these relationships with the city?
Yeah, I think overall that we as a company, we see city as partners. So there's no city that we went in or launch our service without talking to them. But it's a working in progress, right? The thing is so new that some cities are more progressive and embrace it, like early on, and some of the cities still trying to understand it and figure out that how the regulatory framework works and how the infrastructure will be, coming together with the new mobilities, if you would. So that is what we're working on. And for Madrid, for many other cities, sometimes some city will take a pause and then rethink through it and then relaunch it. We had quite a few cities like that. And New York here as well. We're serving some of the neighborhoods and boroughs outside of Manhattan already. But also we're working closely with the New York DOT to discuss whether we can launch a scooter here, whether we should launch bikes in Manhattan as well. It's a working in progress. But what we're happy to see though is that, I kind of see Lime as a little tiny spark, that a spark will generate a much bigger movement of the modernization of urban transportation. That should be much more nimble, much more efficient, much more greener, much healthier, much more sociable, has the community aspect of it, and also much more greener in terms of the energies and take less space.
And that's how you're selling it to the cities when you're going in and trying to create these partnerships.
Yeah, I think that's one part of that. We coming into city, we really help them to solve problems. The problem of traffic, the problem of pollutions, the problem of the public space that park with all private-owned cars. And it's kind of ironic if you think about us that the 25 million sounds really big number, but compared to the total trips or the need in the U.S. alone, we're not even 1% of that, probably 0.5 or less of that. And for a city like we have 2,000, for example, 2,000 scooters, that we have 500,000 cars parking on the street, nobody used them, right? That's the scale we're looking at. So I think our vision for Lime is being the spark, being the starting point, and to generate this much bigger movement. And we're really happy to see that Lyft and Bird and Uber and everyone that joined the course of that.
As you've grown, is there any one mistake that you feel that you've made that you wouldn't do again, or the biggest lesson, I guess, that you've learned from that mistake?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of, we're a young company, so there are a lot of mistakes we have made and a lot of things that we learned. I think the key thing for us is to recognize that, right? That, and then correct the mistakes and learn from it. One of the mistakes, well, I won't say mistake, is something that we don't know, that we use some of the manufacturers to working on the scooter, earlier generation of the scooters, and turn out the quality bar just not high enough. And we took immediate action, took them all off the street, even though that percentage-wise, the risk ratio is still much lower than the average, transportation service, or that we just don't want to take any risk on that side.
And what are you doing now to vouch the manufacturers to make sure that they are providing a higher quality product?
Yeah, so what we did are 3 steps. First is that we redesigned the entire scooter, as you see here, and also we have more around the venue that they keep on improving the safety standard and features. The second part is to partner with much better manufacturers and to ensure the quality. And the third thing we did is we're also the first of a kind in the industry. We built our own lab to do all the testings. So in the past, we're relying on the third parties to do the test, right? And it's not that doing it right or wrong, but the standard is different. Similar to that, if it's a personal-owned vehicle versus a heavy-duty commercial-grade vehicle, their standards are different. And there's no such a lab was built to do that in the past. So we had to build our own. And we build a world-class lab to test all the products that we're going to release in the future.
Very cool. And then I have one last question for you, because we're running out of time, but as this scooter trend takes off and people get used to using these vehicles more and more, are you worried at all about them just buying their own scooter and not using your services anymore? I mean, isn't it quite possible that your success could also hurt you, right? Because people become so open to using these kind of devices.
We actually already see that happening. Well, first of all, right, I think Lime's vision is very aligned with this theme of this conference. It's about ignition. It's about how we ignite the bigger movement of less cars and more greener transportations and more micro-mobility instead of everyone driving a 5, 7-seater cars. So we're happy to see all that happens. And with many of the cities that we launch with, that we've been seeing the surge of the retail scooters and the bikes. And we're really happy about that, to have more users join the course, right? Being part of the bigger movement. And also that, as I mentioned, that there's no product or service that will be one size catch all. So there are different needs for, suburban, which we're not going to efficiently run a program, and some other cases. But the good thing is that we are one of the, at the front line to educate more users that, bikes or scooter could be a very efficient way to get around. I won't have the detailed numbers since we only run limited surveys, but majority of them has not touched a bike or scooter in the last 3 or 5 years. And we're bring them back, right? That to give them opportunity at a really low cost, which literally is $1 or $2, to try it out, and for themselves to decide whether they can use it daily in a city environment or even buy a personal scooter or bike for them to use in other cases. So I think that that's what we wanted to see. That's what we're really happy about.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Brad. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you, Katie.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Please welcome Victoria Canal.
In ebony, breaking free. I'm breaking.
What's up, you guys? I'm a singer, songwriter, a little different from the rest of today. This is a song called Dumb Love. The first time I fell in love was the last time I knew myself. I don't need anybody say to know. Call me a romantic, but I don't like leaving empty-handed. I'm easy to convince with roses and candy. I'd rather know it all than have to guess what's coming up. I'd rather kiss and fall and end up so sick, yeah. I'd rather know it all. If we light the fire, we won't burn. I've been hurt from that I've learned best to love and have lost. 'Cause it's just don't love. We are lost and we're caving in. Now's enough for us. Are you down? Yeah. 'Cause it's just don't love. And they're throwing us to the downs, baby. I hope and pray that you might be down. Yeah. 'Cause baby, I'm down. Baby, I'm down with this dumb love that we found. Baby, I'm down. Baby, I'm down with this dumb love that we found. Standing outside of us, there's a sweetness in this costly love. You might be taken by my words you say. You never know. I'd rather know it all than have to guess what's coming up. I'd rather kiss and fall and end up so sick, yeah. It's just don't love. We are lost and we're caving in. Now's enough for us. Are you down? Yeah. 'Cause it's just don't love. And they're throwing us to the downs, baby. I hope and pray that you might be down. Yeah. 'Cause baby, I'm down. Baby, I'm down with this dumb love that we found. Baby, I'm down. Baby, I'm down with this dumb love that we found. The writing's washed out from the sand. We gotta know if we won't share. And they told us we would lose control. Yeah. Oh, what a lie. Look what we become. Oh, it's just don't love. We are lost and we're caving in. Now's enough for us. Are you down? Yeah, 'cause it's just don't love. And they're throwing us to the downs, baby. I hope and pray that you might be down. Yeah, 'cause baby, I'm down. Baby, I'm down with this dumb love that we found. Baby, I'm down. this dumb love that we found. Thank you. Thank you so much. My name is Victoria Canal, and I'm here to talk to you about what it's like to be an independent artist in today's world. It seems like what matters most, or what's put first in the eyes of a recently turned young adult, I'm 20, is Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, social media, and image, and having the most followers and making sure that you reach a lot of people. But what seems to be missing in a lot of the people that I see and artists that I see is that they're reaching a lot of people without thinking about the message that they want to convey. And I've been touring for the first time this year. I've traveled all over the country to sing for people, and it's been a dream come true. But from what I've learned, I have a pretty unique story because I was born without part of my right arm due to amniotic band syndrome. For those in the back, you guys can see, and that's really affected my mission in the sense that I see that people of all kinds need the encouragement to know that they are enough just as they are, not because of what they look like or how much money they make or their talent or where they're from, what class they're in, but because they're here. And my brother suffers from bipolar disorder and anxiety, and we moved around a lot as kids. And it's hard being the new kid at school, and it's really hard being the new kid with one arm at school. But I think it's hardest to be misunderstood and to feel like there's no environment to reach out to others and say, I don't feel okay and I need help. And I know this conference is about social capitalism, and I don't know a lot about capitalism other than that I participate, but but I do know that there's a need for social change and a voice for young people and all people to feel okay in their skin. And that's what I'm here to encourage, is that whatever business and whatever art form and creative purpose you've found, I believe that there's a huge value in creating a safe space for everybody that you come into contact with, who you look up to, who you are teaching and taking into your circle. A safe space, I think, keeping that in mind is the most powerful thing you can do. So this song, I'm going to finish out with another song, and it's called I Have Never Loved, and it's about my brother who suffers from bipolar. And I just want to thank Business Insider and Ignition for having me. My name is Victoria Canal. Thank you so much. We don't know how to help people, but we do it anyway. We fix our hearts with syllables, and keeping love is out of the question, but we do it anyway. We hold on with everything. I'm 10 feet off Demons take of every part of who we are and choose to be. It's short and shame, and they take our brain and make it heavy. Sometimes simple things need rewarding, like getting out of bed in the morning. You are so brave to be awake and your eyes are open. Whoa, I'm 10 feet off the ground. I have never known, but I'll do it anyway. I would try for you. I have never loved, but I'll do it anyway. Compromise if I have to. I have never loved. I will try to be someone who never lets you down. I am not a stranger, but I hardly know myself. We can't all be brave enough to ask for help. I have never known, but I'll do it anyway. Compromise if I have to. I've never loved. I will try to be someone who never lets you down. Thank you so much, everyone. In ebony, breaking free. I'm breaking free. Got my wounds inside the keys till I can be, till I can breathe. I'm always on my
Please welcome Troy Carter and Brian Logan.
Troy Carter, how's it going?
Good. Give it up for Victoria. She was great. Great voice.
Yes.
Really
yes.
great voice.
So you're a legendary music manager, mentored by Will Smith and James Lasseter, launched the careers of global superstars like Lady Gaga, and entertainment advisor to the Prince estate. And on top of that, running your own businesses, including Atom Factory. You're a busy man.
A bit exhausting, but fun.
Well, thank you for joining us
No,
today.
thanks for having me.
So jumping right into it, wow, let's see, here we go, there we go. You're known all over the world as a legendary sort of music maven. And you have built this incredible empire, music and technology. And you've sort of parlayed your success in music to build your profile as a tech investor. You're an investor in multiple startups. I guess my first question is, what in your mind was the missing link between music and tech that made you say, I need a piece of that action?
I think it was mostly a misunderstanding, right? You know, where I think in the Valley you sort of had this stereotype of LA that was, you know, thought that LA and then media business were sort of dinosaurs, which in some instances they were right. And then I think in LA and in entertainment you had this attitude where the technology companies were pirates, you know, sort of looking to put you out of business. And I think it kind of ended up at this really bad stalemate at one point. And, you know, I think both sides, you know, sort of had guns drawn. And so when I started going up to the Valley, I basically started building relationships and just really getting to know people and sort of served as a translator between Silicon Valley and LA. And I think a lot of it had to do with people not spending time with each other and not really understanding each other's business and businesses and motives. And now I think we're at a much closer point. So where you see companies like Netflix that's really gotten it right with a really hardcore engineering culture up north, but a very creative culture in LA. And you're seeing it with Spotify as well, with, you know, a creative culture plus a hardcore engineering culture. So I'm starting to see them merge a bit.
Nice. What goes through your mind when you're thinking about the types of companies you want to invest in?
We don't look for specific things, you know. So like I'll work with my son, and he works on our investment fund, and Susie, who runs the fund, and my partner Marlon, and we'll just go through ideas of, you know, sort of what does the future look like, you know. And we spend time in a lot of different types of industries and other places, and you know, we just got back from China. And just kind of seeing how far ahead China is on AI and some other technologies right now, payments, and then seeing, you know, I did Africa maybe about 2 months ago, and seeing how, you know, we're going to see this big leapfrog in terms of, you know, them basically. I think they have the ability to surpass America eventually as well, and we think that's going to be a really big market. But just looking at opportunities and then meeting entrepreneurs that sort of look at those problems and are uniquely qualified to solve them.
So in the first question, you were talking about bridging divides between tech and music. When you first joined Spotify, there was this disconnect between the music industry and streaming platforms. And you were sort of brought in to bring those two sides together. Artists at the time, some artists were skeptical of music streaming. What since then has changed?
It's like I almost fix fights for a living. And so you sort of had, you know, the Taylor Swifts and a lot of big artists who were sort of holding out against Spotify. And I think, you know, in the very beginning, I don't think people recognize what Spotify was adding to the industry, because our product was broken, you know, and so I don't think people wanted to steal music. I just think we made it incredibly hard for people to purchase music, you know. So when you do these forced bundles for, you know, $18. And then, you know, you had them in CDs, and you got 2 good songs and 15 bad songs. And, you know, you need a blowtorch to open up the packaging. And then all of a sudden, Sean Fanning and Sean Parker come along with a solution of you can have all of the songs in the world for free. Most people are going to say, I'll take free. And I think what Spotify did was basically figured out we can have a free solution that's ad-supported, that's safer than piracy, where, you know, it's easier to use than piracy, actually. And then also we got the subscription service, but we don't pay you the way a CD would pay you. We pay you over a period of time, and at scale and over a length of time, you end up making a lot of money. Because if you buy the Weeknd CD, we have no idea how many times you played it. You could have liked one song and thrown it out the window, or you could have burned a hole in it because you listened to it a million times. So from a data perspective, we're able to connect those artists with fans, but also it's the first time in history creators have been able to get paid every single time somebody engages with the content versus the sort of one-time purchase. So being able to explain that to the music industry, but also internally at Spotify, work with them on ways to do more for artists and build programs for artists and communicate better with artists and provide content and partnerships with artists, I think that's what helped build that bridge there.
So thinking about that, Spotify had a little bit of a controversy earlier this year with its hateful conduct policy. Has that, or did that, hurt some of the progress that was made on the platforms?
I don't think it hurt Spotify in a way that was critical as much as it was a real internal learning experience at the company. You know, so with the hateful conduct policy, it was basically a policy where if an artist did something off platform, then they wouldn't be supported on platform. And it's such a slippery slope that you got to create very clear rules and guidelines around it. And even the accusation of something that wasn't proven can get you in a position where you're not on platform anymore. And, you know, we were dealing with, you know, some issues when you look at, you know, some communities being over-policed, and, you know, Meek Mills is a good example. And this is a kid who I've known from Philly since he was a teenager. So I was very close to understanding what happened in Philadelphia, where he was falsely accused by corrupt police officers who the FBI ended up investigating. And these police officers ended up not being allowed to testify at trials because of the amount of corruption, and all of these cases got overturned. And I was telling them, you know, when you look at examples like that, if we would have penalized an artist like that on top of him already being penalized, you know, in a criminal justice system, is that who we want to be as a company? So, and I think that, you know, we ended up reversing the policy. And but I think ultimately Spotify made the right move by doing that.
Can you speak to what prompted that idea in the first place?
Well, I think it's certain things where we had to make clear rules. It's like when you target a certain group with any sort of hate speech, you know, that's clear that we're not going to support that. You know, so all of a sudden, there, you know, you got anti-Semitic content on there. You got, you know, racial, like it just was, and it wasn't anything in the name of art where people were, you know, expressing themselves or anything like that. It was basically to hurt other groups. So we said we're going to draw a line and not support any of that type of conduct, so type of content. And so that's what kind of then led to the hateful conduct that kind of led further. It's almost like you start a policy and then the policy goes too far. So, but I think the intent was good, and I think we ended up getting it right on the hateful speech side of it.
Okay. So, following up from that, was there ever a time in your career where you felt like you made the wrong decision? Is there anything that you regret?
Yeah, I've made a ton of mistakes in my career. I think selling my company was probably one of the biggest mistakes that I had made. And but you know, I was a young entrepreneur, and I had to go through that experience because you have to learn what's good for you and what's not good for you. And I think you only can do it by experience. You know, so I think all of the mistakes, the many mistakes I made through my career and through life in general, has made me a better entrepreneur and also empathetic to entrepreneurs that I invest in, artists that I work with. So I think, you know, being able to go through those type of issues, I think it shapes you, though.
Can you give us one example where you've mentored a tech entrepreneur or maybe a young musician on a hard decision that they had to make?
It's every day. It's every day. With artists, you're constantly, as an artist manager, I'm in that artist's life usually 24 hours, 7 days a week. I'm available to that artist. And with Atom Factory, we didn't go out signing superstars. We always had this philosophy of let's work with artists either from the very beginning or sort of mid-career, where we kind of feel like we can have impact. And when you're shaping an artist's career, it's hard when somebody goes from singing in their kitchen to almost one of the biggest stars in the world within a short period of time. It's like going from the Earth to Mars without a spacesuit. You're doing it with your family who hasn't gone through this before. So there's all of these sort of dynamics, and I don't think, and as human beings, you not being able to go to the mall anymore, and you're at dinner with your significant other, and somebody is doing a snapshot of you, and then you're in the, it's all of these crazy things that psychologically isn't good for the human spirit. So and this 24-hour news cycle is really tough on an artist. So if Madonna played on this stage when she was first coming up as an artist, and she tripped over or she sang the wrong note, nobody knows, but now everybody's like this the entire show. So by the time you get off stage, it's on TMZ.
Yeah, it's a Twitter meme now.
Yes, exactly. So it's a different type of pressure. So my job is to kind of guide and shape artists through the new pressures.
So that brings up another question, just curiosity that I had. New artists coming up in the industry today, what's it like coming up in this industry as a new artist, and what is your advice to them?
I think you have a lot more control now. Like, I think before, you had these gatekeepers, and they purposely made it difficult for independent artists to be able to thrive and make a decision to be independent. So when you're doing a radio campaign and it costs $700,000 to get a top 10 record in America, and that's $700,000 cash essentially, who can afford that? Or if MTV's the gatekeeper, and there's one guy making the decision on which videos are going to get played. It's all of these things where these gatekeepers in place. And now, with the beauty of, you got SoundCloud, you got YouTube, you got Spotify, you got TuneCore, you got all of these different outlets where if I want to put out music today, I can make it on my laptop and put it on TuneCore for less than $20 and then have it on Spotify within a week, or have it on YouTube within an hour. So it's these lower barriers to entry, but with that being said, it's a lot of noise. So you got to be really talented to be able to sort of cut through the noise, because there's way more noise and a lot less curated than what it used to be.
Right, and when you say that, I also think about what it takes to build an audience in this day and age. You mentioned how there's a lot of noise, it's hard to break through. What is the first step then to build a career organically?
I think, I'm old school in a way where, you can't bake a cake in a microwave. And real talent has to be cultivated and nurtured. So when you look at, you mentioned Prince earlier, and like being in Prince's vault and seeing his rehearsal tapes, and the amount of time and the quality of the rehearsals was like he was playing Madison Square Garden. So it's like, so when you treat your rehearsals like it's the Garden, and you're doing that every single day, and you're working on that craft every single day, eventually it translates. And like the greats study the greats. So, and so I think with new artists, it's the great thing is they have access to every great entertainer that's ever performed in the history of time. The downside is, in this culture, people want things to happen immediately. So when it doesn't happen immediately, you know, all of a sudden it's like, you know, it's not working. I got to move on to the next thing. But you look at an artist like an Adele, who's, you know, probably one of the most successful artists within this era. Adele didn't take a social media marketing strategy, and it wasn't the, you know, these sort of clever plans or anything like that. It was, I'm gonna create I got one of the best voices in the world. I'm gonna write with some of the best songwriters and music producers and make my songs of a certain quality, and I'm gonna go out every night and sing my face off. And I think, you know, that translates where, you know, marketing can't cover for, you know, for mediocre talent.
True. Very true. You talked about Prince, and I mentioned it earlier. What's it like managing or advising his estate on the entertainment side? I think most people know he wasn't really a fan of music streaming, wasn't really big on newer technologies. So in this day and age, what is that like?
Yeah, I don't know. That's not necessarily true. Like, Prince was one of the first guys to put music on the internet. Like, so he was creating like sort of digital fan clubs. It wasn't the fact that he wasn't a fan of music streaming as much as he was more of a fan of getting paid.
Aren't we all?
So with Prince, you know, he owned all of his masters, and I think, you know, he is famous for changing his name and you know, to the glyph and writing slave on his face when he didn't feel like he was getting a fair deal. And so for him, he just was one of those artists who took a stand and was, you know, and built this movement for protecting artists. And he did things, he was such a maverick. But so when I got called on to come and do the estate, it was like almost like a dream come true, because like the call kind of came out of nowhere. And one of the lawyers called me up on like a Thursday and said, "Can you be in Minneapolis on Tuesday to meet about Prince?" I said, "Okay, I'll walk right now." And I remember going and sitting with the team, and one of his creative directors who he worked with was, you know, it was this famous vault that I, you know, couldn't wait to see and couldn't wait to get into. And he had all of these other rooms, just, you know, floor to ceiling. And his creative director said Prince hadn't been in that vault in years. And, you know, I said, what, did he just kind of want to move past the past and kind of get into the future? He said, no, he forgot the combination to the vault. But when we got in there, it was like amazing. So, you know, just 40 years, you know, all of these years worth of just gems and finding music that's never been heard before, and just some beautiful, beautiful work, beautiful work.
What was that moment like, walking into that vault?
I still get chills because, like, you know, looking at the lyrics for, like, Little Red Corvette when he first wrote it, and, you know, with the little red Corvette that he drew on it, and, like, just being able to almost get inside of his head and sort of understand who he was as an artist, because I think for me it was important to honor him. And I think he left an incredible blueprint, because he was very specific about how he wanted things to roll out. And, you know, he wanted Purple Rain remastered, and, you know, reading his personal notes about how he wanted it remastered and what he wanted to come next and all of these things. So, you know, where he didn't leave behind a will, but he left behind his legacy and how he wanted his legacy to play out.
So switching gears a little bit here, what should creative people, investors, and stakeholders in the music and entertainment industry be on the lookout for next? What's the next big opportunity that you can't afford to miss?
Can't afford to miss is hard. I think, you know, one of the things that's, you know, we look a lot at sort of what's the future of work and how that is going to have impact on society, sort of what's the impact on education, and then sort of the trickle-down effect from that. So looking at, artificial intelligence, robotics, and already seeing sort of what is coming down the pipeline. So, I'm hoping, I'm pessimistic about how quickly everything's moving and how unprepared I think we are as a society of how quickly this is going to come, and how education's not in a place that's ready to sort of train what a new workforce is going to look like yet at scale. And I think people are kind of looking at, I hear a lot about, well, it's only going to be jobs, that's, sort of, that provide, that's repetitious. And it's going to be way more than that, right? And so that's one of the things we're thinking a lot about. So artificial intelligence and robotics, and kind of looking at where 5G, of course, and the impact that 5G is going to have on sort of the next generation of companies that we're going to be looking at investing in. So sort of how Uber, Postmates, all of these sort of companies that thrive and were born from mobile tech. We think a whole new generation of companies are going to be born off of the platform of 5G, so starting to think about that as well.
And just branching off from that, how do you see changes in how we consume music evolving in the next 5-10 years?
I think, predictive analytics is interesting. When you're prompted to listen to music when you don't know you want to listen to music, or that song comes on that you don't know that you wanted to listen to. So, so sort of when the whole world ties in together, and we know that you're on that date right now, that you're going to be on that date, and we know exactly what song to play, right? And because we sort of know who you're going to be on that date with eventually, right? So all of these sort of things, and you're getting in your car, and we know what mood you're in. And so I think just sort of predictive analytics that are going to come through prompts is going to be interesting with music. So where right now it's sort of on demand and lean back, I think, it'll get to the point where, music sort of greets you.
Interesting. So last minute here.
By the way, that's not something Spotify's building, so if anybody else is building it, let me know.
Good stuff. This is the 45th anniversary of hip-hop music this year. What do you see when you look at hip-hop culture today from your vantage point?
It's amazing. Notorious B.I.G. said that line, whoever thought that hip-hop would take it this far, right? And, when you look at sort of, it went from I remember seeing Lauryn Hill on the cover of Time magazine for the first time, that first time. And that was like the moment where I'm like, wow, hip hop has come a long way. And fast forward, traveling the world and seeing how localized hip hop has become in each culture. So before it would be Western culture, travel all throughout the world, and those were the, it would be, the Jay-Z's or DMX's or whoever, Will Smith's, and those guys were the #1 rappers around the world. And now you go to France, you go to the Netherlands, you go to China, you go to Korea, you go to all of these countries, and it's all localized, and those local stars are just as big, if not bigger, in those markets than Western rappers. And then from a cultural perspective, you see the culture travel. So the way, people dress and from hair to influence and style. And, so all of those things sort of, I never in my wildest dreams would have thought that hip hop would be, this sort of global multi-billion-dollar phenomenon that it is today.
Great. I know we're out of time, but I just want to get this last question in because it's a fun question, and I just want to hear your take. 20 years from now, what's going to be more valuable, a massive collection of music CDs or a vintage iPod?
Ooh. Which CDs are there? Is it Michael Bolton CDs?
Any CDs. Any CDs.
Any CDs. I'm going for the iPod, the first generation iPod with all of the stolen music in it. 50,000 songs, much more valuable.
All right. Thank you, Troy. I appreciate it.
Cool, thank you.
Please welcome David Levy and Jeff Ramsey.
I believe the name of my partner here was mispronounced. It's David Levy.
That's okay.
The president of Turner.
I'll lie down on this couch. We'll have a
Well,
therapy
we talked
session on
about
it.
that. We only have 15 minutes. I don't want you to fall asleep. So actually, I want to start off with 2 warnings for you, David.
Okay.
Warning number 1, how many people were here this morning? Okay. I seem to
dayers.
have a curse, so if there's a fire alarm at any point, don't be alarmed.
I heard it was only a muffin, though.
Yeah, it's only a muffin. It was a burnt muffin, folks. I feel like we should do the muffin dance or something. The second thing is that I know you're a big sports fan.
I am.
I don't know shit about sports, so I'm not going to be.
This is going to be an awkward interview then.
Yeah, but so you're free to go in that direction.
All
It's
right.
just that I'm not going to be able to follow with you.
Okay.
So let's get started. I think we've all heard today, and my presentation certainly pointed to this, that the TV world is changing pretty dramatically in terms of consumers and the devices they're using, their video consumption habits, business models are changing. David, I understand that you have worked with the visionary Ted Turner.
I have.
So what would he say today about the fate of traditional TV?
Well, I'm glad you brought Ted Turner's name up.
That's what we rehearsed.
Yeah, well, we did. That's why I'm glad you brought it up, because it would have been awkward if we didn't, bring that up.
It'd be very awkward.
But I did get to work for Ted for 14 years. And, the word visionary, as you just said, I think gets tossed around a little bit too freely.
People have even called me that, so
yeah.
I understand.
This gentleman, Ted, was a visionary. I had 14 years with him, and he launched Cartoon Network with the Hanna-Barbera Live, a global 24-hour cartoon channel. Everybody advised him not to launch a 24-hour news channel, that it wouldn't work. He understood the value of content. He was the one that said content is king. So you tie that all back, I would say that he would be very bullish on the TV business right now. He would say, innovate more. What he would say is that television shouldn't be defined the way it's defined like we all think it is, which is hanging up on a wall in your house. It's not defined by watching primetime television anymore. It's not defined by the old Nielsen metric of how we say viewership is coming in by ratings, ratings by day parts. What he would say is television is everywhere. And that's how Turner thinks about the TV business. We don't think about it as this thing on the wall. We think about it as an iPad, an iPhone, mobility. We think about generating fans and where fans are. More people are consuming television content, just not on their wall.
Yeah, I'm sorry I wasn't paying attention. I was watching video on my watch.
Oh, okay, there you go.
But yeah, I get the point.
Okay, I thought you were worried about the,
yeah.
we hit our 15 minutes already?
No. We still have a few more minutes. So another question is that we see pretty rampant consolidation in the, whatever you want to call it, the TV, video, cable industry today. And just looking at your position in Turner, which recently became a part of Time Warner, which in turn recently became a part of the big behemoth we call AT&T.
Yeah, it's been fun.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
What does being owned by AT&T mean for Turner, and how does it change things?
Well, I think as you look at any two companies integrating with each other, buying each other, or merging or acquisition of each other, the most important thing that has to work is that they both have to be needs on both sides. And this particular merger, I think, has the perfect needs on both sides. What Turner needed desperately was we needed data. We needed to understand the consumer much better than we had in our own arsenal. So we needed the 100 million AT&T phone consumers, the 25 million direct TV, the 7 million AT&T universe, having that understanding of first-party data that will allow us to have better advertising products, that will allow us to understand consumers better so we can produce better content, that will allow us to have better marketing campaigns. That data was extremely important.
So it's both about scale and being able to kind of track the consumer through their journey?
Yeah, and also the platforms that AT&T had. So, being able to download BR Live, pre-downloaded on all AT&T phones for the future, or CNN.com, having the CNN logo already preloaded on their new phone is extremely valuable for a company like us. Now we have a platform to launch direct-to-consumer products, things of that nature. AT&T really needed quality premium programming. And between Warner Brothers and HBO and Turner, we had that valuable quality premium program that produces fans, that allows fans to stay maybe attached to their phone, which may slow down churn rate. And they wanted to have that content. So we had this incredible content, incredible brands. They had incredible distribution platforms and incredible data, and I think there was a need for both. So I think it's actually a good marriage.
It's interesting because I was at another media conference. There are other ones, but I was listening to Peter Chernin, who was asked the perennial question, so what's more important, is content king or is distribution king? And he had a flat out answer. He said, it's a false dichotomy. Both content and how you get it across all these different devices is critically important. Would you agree with that assessment? And if so, what do you see the critical success factors for Turner, particularly under AT&T, in terms of your business going forward?
I would say yes. I think, Ted, as I said just a couple of minutes ago, was the original person who thought about content as king and came up with the concept around that. But I do believe in today's world, if you don't have great content, you could have the best distribution platform in the world, and if you don't have great content, who cares? And I think one of the reasons why Netflix was so successful early on, and certainly today, but early on, was the fact that people had all these devices. They had iPhones and iPads, and ultimately they were trying to find content that would work on these devices. And Netflix had a very easy user face, and it was working. And it worked easily on almost every device you wanted to, where TV Everywhere, one of the cable applications, wasn't working that well. It was a little clunky, and so that catapulted Netflix into where it is today. From our perspective, and again, going back to the distribution and having the data, to me, I like this whole thing circling back to an advertising business and how it helps our advertising platforms and our advertising products. Because when I think about advertising, I think about 3 A's. I think about audience, I think about addressability, and I think about attribution. And all 3 of them have to happen. You have to build audiences through quality content, right? And through good distribution. You have to have addressability. One of the things that I'm very, very concerned about in this business is we're not moving fast enough in the television business on addressability. Addressability meaning to be able to target each and every one of you in this room with a different ad over the television device. It's coming. It's here. DirecTV has a product, but they have a product in 15 million homes. We need to be in 90 million homes. We need to do this on a 90 million home basis. And then attribution, meaning be able to actually say that someone walked into a Ford dealership. I'll use Ford as an example. If I can build a quality audience, a large audience, that I can say to Ford, hey, why don't you advertise in this great reach vehicle called television? And then I can go into an audience-based or addressability type thing where I can say, but if you really want to reach Mustang, you have the Ford overall reach, but I can actually target Mustang viewers. And then the attribution would be I can find out whether you actually went online because of the phone, because of the router in your house, because AT&T. I can find out whether you went online to either create a car or look at a Mustang online, or you walked into a Ford dealership because you have the GPS in the phone. So I can do attribution, I can do addressability, and I can build audience.
Right, and we're talking you're basically also talking about direct-to-consumer, right? But as a traditional cable company that basically was in the world of there's an intermediary, an advertiser that is subsidizing that content, isn't it an entirely different mindset to then suddenly go straight after the consumer? I mean, what does that take to to make that shift?
Yeah, I think you need both. I mean, I think a modern media company today, a modern media company that we are today, we still love the great ecosystem that we're in with our cable operators and our satellite and our telco. That still has to stay vibrant and healthy, and we have to buy great product, we have to buy sports product, and we have to buy original programming, and so forth. But we also have to have a relationship, a one-on-one relationship with the consumer. I think everybody understands that we have to understand what their likes, their dislikes. We have to have so we can personalize content, so we know how you navigate through your own devices, and we have to be able to control the consumer interface. Because right now—
Does that include like customer service? I mean, how far does this go?
Completely.
Yeah.
When you're direct to consumer, right now, if someone gets angry at Comcast because our program didn't air right or we didn't like what they saw, they're angry at me, yet I don't control the interface.
Right.
Comcast does. So, and rightfully so, they pay us a lot of money for that relationship. We want to make sure we have a relationship with everybody in this room. And so I think you've seen recently, and I think we announced and a couple of weeks ago with John Stanky, my boss, that we're launching our own a large offering from Warner Media, direct-to-consumer product. Turner had Filmstruck, which we're now folding into this direct-to-consumer product. Boomerang, and then if anybody watched the match, which was Phil Mickelson versus Tiger Woods on Black Friday.
I did hear about that.
I gave you a refund, by the way. We had a little technical difficulty there, but if you watched the match, you watched it through BR Live or through your cable operator, but you downloaded the BR Live app and you got to see our new direct-to-consumer product.
You made it free when it didn't work. Right.
We had a technical problem, we made it free.
So many people—
Thank you for reminding me of that.
I thought you brought it up, but many in the industry are worried about the ultimate form of ad blocking, which is consumers essentially skipping commercials or commercial television by bypassing the traditional ad-supported distribution systems and essentially paying for the content they want to see, a la Hulu.
See, in my household, we skip the content. We'd only watch commercials in my house.
Oh, is that right?
We
How
skip content.
many others of you just watch commercials? I'm not talking about the Super Bowl. Okay, you might be a little—
I might be the only one?
Yeah.
Well,
But seriously, what has Turner's strategy been for that, with that shift towards people paying for content they want to see, and how might that shift accelerate or change under the umbrella of AT&T?
Yeah, so first of all, the consumer experience is really, really important. And I think from a Turner perspective, the way we used to think about different areas of our company, we used to keep probably advertising first, distribution second, and consumer experience third. I think if you take a look at our organization today, and the mantra of our company is we keep the consumer experience first, distribution second, and advertising third, actually. So the consumer experience for us is at the top of the list. And part of that is how many commercials, the commercial loads. And you see that at Turner, we've reduced our commercial loads each and every year. True TV is down to 50% of its inventory that it used to be in prime time. All of our TNT originals are half the inventory that they used to be. But I think really what this is all boiling down to is what I talked about earlier, which is addressability and contextual advertising. And I'll use sports, unfortunately, as an example, but I can use Rick and Morty. I can use
sure. Most of the people can relate to it in this room.
When you see a Capital One commercial that is relevant to the NCAA tournament with Charles Barkley and Jim Nance and Samuel L. Jackson and Spike in the commercial, that's contextually relevant to the content you're actually watching on television, and people tend to like that. It's actually content that people enjoy. It's when it's something that has no relationship to what you're doing. So again, going back to addressability, if I'm able to shrink the commercial loads and make more contextually relevant ads to what you're watching, either through IP or through something that you may be doing. For example, if you're heading to Europe and you've been online looking at Europe and we know that you've been checking out Europe and you're on there, then if I send contextually relevant ads, whatever show you're watching, whether it be sports or anything else, and have it more focused to what is important to you, you're going to tend to watch that better. You're not going to have the same experience. So I'm not really thinking that advertising is going to the wayside. I think it has to evolve. It has to get into addressability, attribution, and has to build audience.
Sense. I think the last question would be, I think we're all aware that companies like Netflix, Amazon, even Apple's getting into the game of spending billions or zillions of dollars on content, and a lot of this content is pretty darn good. So there's a plethora of really high quality content out there. How is Turner going to compete in this environment where there is so much premium content?
Well, the great thing is we have great brands with our own premium content, our own great IP. I think every channel you just mentioned, every SVOD product, Hulu and Netflix, would love to have original Rick and Morty's, would love to have original Samantha Bee's, would love to have The Alienist, one of our shows on TNT. We just had 33 Emmys nominations for our content. So, bring it on. I mean, the competition's good, and it just makes you guys have better quality premium programming that's out there.
Yeah. Well, that's a great segue that we just had great premium programming for the last 15 minutes.
We did a whole 15.
And we did it without any alarms. So please give a round of applause to David Levy from Turner.
Thank you.
Please welcome Michael Rubin and Meek Mill with Nicholas Carlson.
You're supposed to sit in the middle, right?
I am?
You're over, wait, all right, whatever.
Listen, I don't take direction well for locations.
Okay, hello everyone, again, nice to see you, or at least these lights. All right, so here's where I want to start. I'm just going to kind of introduce you as best I can, and then we can go further. Michael is a billionaire entrepreneur who built and sold big commerce companies, and he sold one, bought one back. Runs things called Fanatics and Kinetic. We can get into that. We'll get to that later. He's a part owner of the Philadelphia 76ers, which is a NBA team. And
an exciting NBA team.
An excited NBA team. He says, this is just in your bio now, he says Adam Silver did not make him fire Sam Hinkie, because I know people care about that. All right, and then Meek Mill is a rapper who's based in Philadelphia, grew up there, and he has had 2 #1 hits, 5 top 10 hits, and has a new album out called Championships, which is on its way to #1.
Yeah, it should be good.
Definitely
on the way to #1.
Yeah,
it should be good.
Did I get all that right?
Yeah, you got everything right.
All right, so, normally people with those bios don't end up being friends, and so let's start there. How did you guys meet and become friends? What's the story?
I was sitting next to Mike at a basketball game, the NBA All-Star basketball game, and I was with my ex-girlfriend, and we was taking a lot of pictures, and Mike was like, who are you? Am I supposed to know you? I was like, who are you? I'm like, I'm Meek Mill. I'm like, who are you? He like, I'm one of the Sixers owner. I'm from Philadelphia Sixers. And I'm like, I'm from Philadelphia. And after he said that, I just started thinking, I was just like, how did you get from 3, 4, 5 million to owning a NBA basketball team? And he was like, I like those questions.
I like that question too.
Yeah, I want to know.
Well, you know what I saw, it was funny because it was the first time we met. Meek was like literally just asking a question every minute. How do you do this? How do you do that? And what I saw in him was a different version of me, because I've always learned by being a sponge to others. I barely made it out of high school. I went to college for part of one semester. And for me, the way to learn and grow is to ask great questions. He was asking good question after good question about how does he build his career, how does he build his business, not music questions, more like what's the business aspect of it. So, the truth be told, at the time we met, Meek being from Philly, me being one of the owners of the Sixers, Meek started coming to a lot of our games. We were actually going through a very difficult rebuild at that time. I think Meek was actually the most exciting part of the Sixers.
Yeah.
We actually would have given him a 10-day contract 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
I'm kidding, obviously. But we started spending time, and I think over 4 or 5 years became really good friends. And I had the unfortunate or fortunate experience of really being part of you know, kind of the mess that he went through with the criminal justice system. And it's actually still going on today.
Let's get right to that mess. And Meek, can you tell us the story of what happened to you? I mean, going way back.
Well, I'm from one of the ghettos of America in North Philadelphia. I grew up there my whole life up to the age of probably 22. And just stepping out the house, you step out on the doorstep, you're stepping into a drug-infested environment, violence. And actually, at the age of 19, I was arrested by the Philadelphia Strike Force, and I was found guilty of some crimes I didn't commit, and I was put on probation for 10 years. I think it was in 2009. And throughout the probation, I went to the dentist probably in 2013. They prescribed me Percocets for a wisdom tooth being pulled. I ended up getting addicted to Percocets. And in Philadelphia, when you're addicted to a drug or you have any drugs in your system, you go see a probation officer. It's not really a line where you could just go to rehab. It's straight to prison. So I was sent back to prison for being addicted to Percocets, and they actually extended my probation 2 more years. So anytime I had a small violation, which is called a technical violation, if anybody don't know what a technical violation is called, technical violation could be as simple as having police contact, having a Percocet in your system, marijuana, basically not committing crime. And a technical violation extended my probation out, and probably 3 years, 4 years after that, I was sentenced to 2 to 4 years for actually popping a willie in New York City. And I asked Mike one day, I was like, you should come to court with me, because I always used to go back and forth with Mike, and I used to be like, yo, it's 2 different sides of America. I live in a different world than where you come from. And he used to always say, what you said, Mike?
I used to say, you live in a great country, don't give me that BS. Like, we live in one great country, there's not 2 Americas. And Meek would say, there are 2 Americas. We didn't really argue about much. We get in these heated debates about, are there 2 Americas, 1 America? And the truth be told, and I'll remember this for the rest of my life, after I watched him get sentenced to 2 to 4 years in prison for popping a wheelie on a motorcycle and breaking a fight up, of which there were no charges in either case. And I watched a probation officer say how great he was and recommend no sentence. And I watched a district attorney recommend no sentence. And then I asked the lawyers, why are we here? They said, well, no one ever gets sentenced in that set of circumstances, because if a probation officer and DA both recommend no sentence, you never get sentenced. And then they sent him to jail for 2 to 4 years. And literally, he calls me an hour later from prison. First words out of his mouth, I told you so. I'm like, really? You just got sent to prison for 2 to 4? He's like, I told you there's 2 Americans. I'm like, you were right, I was wrong.
No, because when I went to court, he was like, you don't have any charges. Like, the willie was actually a traffic ticket. Breaking up a fight in the airport was actually a citation, and it was no charges.
Yeah. There are lots of details here that we should, like, just for the audience, we should make.
Yeah, because you might not come from a world of even knowing anything about the criminal system. So a citation is basically a ticket. You don't go to jail, you don't get processed. And Mike,
you went to jail for it.
Yeah, for
Everybody
sure.
else wouldn't go to jail for it.
But Mike thought it was almost impossible for me to go to prison. And even coming from where I come from, just, excuse me, being around Mike, it taught me to, like, value myself kind of more, because he used to be like, no, you shouldn't be shackled and sent away for 2 years for popping a willie. And where I come from, that was just a normal thing. Like, people go to jail 2, 3 years, sentences for smoking marijuana, small things. And when I went to court, when I went to jail, I called him. I was like, I told you, Mike, it's not impossible to go to jail for, like, popping a willie or something as small.
Yeah, I mean, the story is, it's worth, I just want to repeat it so everyone really gets the details, because it's really worth totally understanding. And so just forgive me for a second as I look at notes here just to make sure I get it right. But you were arrested in 2007, you were 19, for possession of unregistered firearm.
Yes.
And alleged to have possessed drugs. Now, like, there was...
And by the way, and pointing a gun at a police officer, of which 10 years later, one of the two arresting officers came back and said, no, he didn't point the gun, the whole thing's a lie.
And the one
signed
who
an
said
affidavit that said that.
The one who said he did was then listed on a secret list of corrupt police officers.
Correct.
By the way.
2 questionable to testify.
Worth mentioning. So this
since left the police force.
This is the original crime for which you were sentenced to, it looks like 23 months of county confinement and then 10 years of probation, right? That's basically the initial thing that happened. And then in March 2017, some friends of yours were getting sort of assaulted in an airport, and you went to defend them. You weren't arrested, but you were given a summons in lieu of arrest. And then in 2017, you were shooting a video in New York, and you were arrested, but prosecutors decided not to pursue charges. So in spite of not being arrested in either incident, you still had to go to court to answer for even just being
police contact. Like
police contact.
The prosecutors in New York, first time going to court, no
So
charges.
no charges.
Yes.
Police contact, which is just contact.
Which
and
is
then,
for a guy that looked like me. And that's why I dress, like when I do seminars and talk at things, I dress this way so people can view me and understand me as who I am. I like to dress up sometimes. And just for a person that looks like me, police contact is like probably at least once a month, especially in environments where there's a lot of crime and a lot of bad things happen.
And so, no charges. And then sentenced to 2 to 4 years in prison because of probation violations.
Yes.
Right, so that's what had you upset.
Well,
and you told me, by the way.
To me, it seemed absolutely unbelievable. Had this been anybody other one of my really close friends, I had heard about all these crazy situations with the judge. I had heard about how none of this made sense, but it was so unbelievable that you kind of almost didn't process it or believe it. And finally, Meek said to me, hey, if you're not too busy, why don't you come to court with me today? And so I went to court, and I thought I was going for it was a probation. I thought it was going to be like a 15 minutes. They come in, they say, you shouldn't have got a traffic ticket for popping a wheelie, and you shouldn't have broken up a fight and gotten a parking ticket for that, and go home. And I sat there, and it was literally, it went on for like 4 hours. This woman judge was in her glory, just getting to be responsible for his life, and I watched the probation officer get up and say, what a great person he is and how much he's developed. I'm like, I thought this was supposed to be the person negative on him, and she was the probation officer was so positive. She said, we recommend no sentence. And then the DA said, we recommend no sentence.
The DA?
The district attorney, who's supposed to be charging him. And I was so confused, like I'm a person of common sense, like I'm not that smart, but I have a little bit of common sense. And I literally said, like, why are we here? They said, like, again, don't worry about it. And sure enough, an hour or two later, he's sentenced to 2 to 4 years in prison. He's, taking his watch off, and they're taking him in handcuffs and taking him away. And, for me, had they said, hey, it's 15 days of house arrest, I would have said, suck it up. It's ridiculous, but suck it up. But to take someone's freedom for doing nothing, this guy has literally been to prison for a charge that and he says it all the time, and I now get it. What do you always say?
Can we explain that too? Just because it's almost embarrassing to have that on your name. I used to always say to Mike probably like once every 6 months or something, we'd hang around each other. I'd be like, do you know I'm found guilty for pointing a gun at 2 police officers, a young black man?
And a strike force of 6.
Yeah. It's like, it was a raid going on, a group of police, probably about 6 to 8 cops. And they sent in 5 cops at one time. They have the ram that breaks the door down. They come with their firearms drawn out. So they arrested me. I got arrested. I don't know if anyone ever seen my mugshot. It's Google. You can Google it. Stitches on both sides. My whole face is swollen. I was the one that really was beat up, but when I got to the police station after I went to the hospital, I was charged with pointing a gun at a police officer. Actually, my lawyer was like, do you want to take a deal? I'm like, no, I don't want to take a deal for this because I didn't do it. But basically, I used to always say to Mike, like, do you really think, just for my own personal reasons, I used to say, did you really think I pointed a gun at a police officer? Where I come from, if you watch news, you would really know that's almost like suicide for a young black man to pick up a gun and point a gun at a police officer.
Just to circle on a thing, because I know some people are probably thinking, why have a gun? Why have a gun? And is that just...
What'd you say?
Why have a gun?
Why have a gun?
Bringing it back to where I started from, I said this on CNN the other day. The moment you come out of your mother's house at the age of 5 years old, you're stepping into a ruthless environment. And I ask people this all the time. They have data on this. You can actually Google it or however you get information. In my neighborhood, people die 7 days a week. In a small neighborhood, 7 days a week. I don't know if y'all watch TV a lot, media. You see mass killings in schools and malls. Them things happen in my neighborhood 7 days a week, and we grew up into that. Like I tell Mike sometimes, I say, you grew up in love. We grew up in survival. We grew up in, my father was murdered. I have countless amount of friends that was murdered, and it's almost like living in survival 7 days a week. And I always ask people, if you live on this one block and down the street someone was murdered, on the other end of the block someone was murdered, around the corner someone was murdered, and red dots to mark where bodies dropped in these areas, you're gonna kick into survival mode as a human being, and it's almost like speaking on PTSD. If you're in the Army and you were traumatized and you've been through some things, and when you come back, your mind may not be right. The first thing they bring up when you go to court is PTSD. We grew up in that from stage one of our life. I always speak in some of my music, I say, I used to be on honor roll. I used to play Sega. I used to like to do art. I used to play basketball at the ages from 5 to probably 14 years old. When I got 14, 15 years old, these are the ages that young black men like me die in my neighborhood, and I'm actually seeing this. You see blood on the ground. On one of my songs, I said, wake up in the morning feeling evil. I said, see my brother's blood on the pavement, you wake up in the morning feeling evil. It's almost like waking up and being angry. You ever see a black kid in a neighborhood and their face is balled up and they look like they're just mad at something? It's because of trauma of what they've been through. And I grew up that 7 days a week. Like, this side of my life has been going on probably since I was 23 years old, traveling, experienced things, business, working. Before that, it wasn't any of that. I grew up in a single-parent home. My mom doing 8 hours a day at work. My father's in a graveyard. Basically, at the age of 12, I'm just in the middle of a jungle, living in survival mode. And I think anybody in this room, if you was in this position, you would kick into survival mode to protect yourself. People that do reckless things with guns, I don't think it should be no neighborhood in America full of guns. I don't really believe in that lifestyle, but this is the life that we came up in, and I had no choice to be in that position.
Two Americas, and in that moment, in that probation hearing, you told me that you had a physical reaction to what happened.
I did. I mean, for me, I believed, up until I saw this, I would have believed that 99.9% of arrests were accurate. I would have believed that the legal system worked the right way in 99.9% of the scenarios. And when I saw a guy who the probation officer and district attorney both recommended no sentence, I saw a guy who I knew was a great human being who, I'd been on, 50 trips with, had been, to, 50 of our basketball games, had been around all my friends, all the people in sports, owners, had been completely integrated into my world, and everyone loves this guy. And now I'm watching this guy taken to prison for 2 to 4 years because he popped a wheelie and he broke up a fight because, the judge doesn't like him and she's got that power. I had a absolute out-of-body experience. And, I remember looking at him like, again, I'll remember this whole thing for the rest of my life. I looked at him and I said, I'm not, first of all, I told him an hour later, an hour earlier, he was definitely not going to prison. I said, we had this little intermission because this hearing went on for so long. I said, you're great. Don't worry about this. There's no chance you're going to prison. And an hour later, they're taking him away. And I said, I'm not going to stop until I get you out of prison. And fortunately, there was a woman from Rock Nation who I'd never met before who was sitting next to me. And she said, I'm not going to stop. And we kind of joined forces and said, we're not going to stop till we get out of prison. What was really fascinating for me was, in the beginning, this started with, how do we get my really close friend out of prison who I knew wasn't, didn't belong there, was beyond unfairly treated, and the situation was completely wrong. What happened then is my immediate reaction was, hey, we got to figure this thing out. So we went out and basically got a bunch of investigators. And the investigators first looked at the judge's cases, and everything looked normal. Then they looked at the judge's background and found out the judge had actually sued about 30 people individually. How's someone involved in 30 personal lawsuits? I haven't been in a personal lawsuit in my entire life. So how's this judge suing 30 people? Then we started interviewing the different people. And we're hearing all kinds of crazy stories. And so now we know, okay, there's something really wrong with this situation. But then Meek kept saying to me, Michael, you're so mad at what you saw. I never pointed the original gun. I've told you this 100 times. So the investigators went out and started interviewing the police officers. And literally the first police officer we interviewed said, oh, yeah, I was one of the 2 arrested officers. He didn't point the gun. The whole thing's a lie. What'd you say? Yeah, he didn't point the gun. He was trying to get rid of his gun, and he was running away, and the whole thing's a lie. We said, well, you signed an affidavit. They said, yes. And then now now it's February. And by the way, I told him he got sentenced November 6th of last year. I told him he'd be home for Thanksgiving. I told him he'd be home for Christmas. I told him he'd be home for Super Bowl, then All-Star game. Now we've got this cop who said he didn't actually do it. We know the cop that testified that said he did it is on a list of cops that are so dirty they're not allowed to testify and got fired from the police force. And now he's still in prison. And that's when the light bulb went off that it's not just about him, that fundamentally the whole criminal justice system is broken. And that's when our conversation started going from how do we get you out of prison to once we get you out of prison, how do we take on this fundamentally broken criminal justice system? And today what I can tell you is, before November 6th of last year, I had no understanding of the criminal justice system. I mean, none. I thought it worked well. I thought, this was a constructive system. A year into this, or 13 months into this, I can tell you, there's 6.7 million people in the criminal justice system today in America. The rate of incarceration is 5 times the rest of the world. So we have 5 times more prisoners on a per capita basis than the rest of the world. We have 4.5 million people on probation and parole. And I think if you look back and said, like, what's a logical number, it would probably be half or less while still keeping your communities safe. And that's when we said, hey, we got to really do something about this. And I think Meek would say, and I don't want to speak for you, but I'm going to. I think Meek would say, I think he'd say he's pretty fortunate. He's, he had the support of good friends and people around him. But of the 6.7 million people that are in the criminal justice system, most don't. 99.9% of the people don't. And I think we said, you know what? Shit happens for a reason. You know what? We got to turn this really negative situation into a positive. He just went to prison for 5.5 months for popping and wheeling and breaking up a fight when no one thought he should go to prison. Then how do we use this to kind of fix the system? And so we've been incredibly focused on that, and we're in the middle of starting what we hope can be, one of the most impactful foundations within criminal justice reform.
Can I say this too? The moral of the story is, just to keep people up to date, this happened at the age of 19, and my environment, in order to survive, it was just 2 ways out. You either die or you go to jail. And I paid the price for actually carrying a firearm. I did at least 2 to 3 years in prison for carrying a firearm from the age of 19 almost up to the age of 25. I'm 31 right now. I caught this case at 19. I've never been back to prison for crime ever again in my life. And at the age of 31, I was sent back to prison just for a technical violation, not committing crime.
Let's talk about the problem. Like, what is the problem?
The problem is fundamentally each state has different laws, and many states' laws don't make sense. We're in a state, Pennsylvania, where Meek and I are both from, and literally they have no cap on probation. So many states have a cap on probation. The majority of states have a cap on probation. You can't be on probation for more than 5 years in the majority of states. If you've paid your time and you have a felony, you cannot be on probation for more than 5 years. Pennsylvania has no cap. Meek has been on probation for, I think, 10 or 11 years so far, and he has another 6 left. He's going to set the Guinness Book of World's Record for longest time ever spent on probation, okay? And it makes no sense. So if you just change the laws, then, an individual judge couldn't make a poor decision like Judge Brinkley did in Meek's case. Yeah. So we're now going to work. So we're starting this foundation. We've got incredible partners. We've already raised $50 million. Myself, Meek, a bunch of other really incredible partners. We're going to be announcing it in the next several weeks. And our focus is going to be how do we get at least 1 million people out of the system within the next 5 years. And we're going to do it while keeping communities equally as safe. Like, we believe if you do something wrong, you've got to pay your time. But you shouldn't, someone shouldn't be, if someone smokes weed, how do you send someone to jail for that? If someone takes a Percocet, how do you send someone to prison for that? I just read a stat that said that 25% of the people that go to prison each year are for technical probation violations. The 2 biggest violations, smoking weed and missing your appointment with probation. Yeah. I mean, how do you send someone to prison for that? It's completely illogical. So we joke, some days, I wake up and I'm so inspired about how we're helping to, to kind of take on this challenge. Other days you're like, my God, this is such a mess. How'd you end up in the middle of this? But at the end of the day, we have to take action because the system is fundamentally broken.
Yeah, a stat you shared with me earlier, 750,000 people go to prison or jail per year, and half are for probation violations.
Yeah, quarter, actually.
Quarter,
yeah,
okay.
that's what I was just mentioning.
Yeah, and not to make it like a pity party about me. Like, I've been in prison with, like, a bunch of men who had more time than me for actually smoking weed. A lot of people who...
Eric Riddick, is that one? Is it?
Yeah, Eric Riddick, even if I can explain his situation, he has 25 years in prison. He found new evidence. He hired a forensic guy to do evidence on his case, and the evidence came back that the crime could not be, it was impossible for him to commit this crime. It's a rule in Pennsylvania, if you don't admit evidence within 60 days, even if it shows that you're innocent, it doesn't count. So if 60 days go by and you had evidence proving that you were innocent, totally innocent of your case, being as though you didn't admit that evidence in 60 days is not admissible.
It makes no sense. We met a guy a few weeks ago who was in his 40s. When he was 20 years old, in his early 20s, he had two less than $100 of cocaine. Got arrested, went to prison for it. 20 or 25 years later, he had 2 joints. He got sentenced to 13 years in jail. Why? Because they had a law that said on your third strike, he had 2 coke offenses 20 years earlier. Yeah. On his third offense, it's mandatory. He went to prison for 13 years for smoking weed. I mean, again, completely broken system.
So on its face, I mean, that's obviously horrible, and it just doesn't seem rational. So what's the reason why? You're an entrepreneur. You must.
Sure, and that's why, to me, I just take a very, kind of what makes sense. Yeah. Here's the bottom line. I come from business, not politics. The criminal justice system is a state-by-state situation. Some states are forward-thinking. Some states are very backwards. Pennsylvania, which is a great state, has very backwards laws from a criminal justice perspective. Fortunately, we have a great governor, we have a great mayor, we have a great, bunch of people in the criminal justice system that want to change it. But we now need to take on state by state to go after the worst states who have the laws that make the least sense and help to change them. The good thing is most people agree. Like this is when people hear Meek's story and here's a guy who was proven has been wrongfully convicted, what he's convicted of, sent back to prison multiple times for never committing a new crime. No one thinks that this guy should have gone to prison. So using Meek as a great example and him taking on the role to say, hey, I'm going to use my story to help change the laws is really an incredible opportunity, I think, for the rest of the country to get this system working properly. But it's fundamentally just broken laws that don't make sense, that are very old and antiquated.
And we're running out of time, but reformnow.com, you're working with Robert Kraft, the Patriots owner, others are involved, Jay-Z.
Yes.
What is the organization you're working on?
Did we even come up with it?
Yeah, so we haven't announced. The details are going to come out in the next couple weeks. What I can tell you is there's 8 founding partners. We've already committed $50 million to this from the 8 of us. You've named some of the partners so that we haven't formally announced everything yet. We will shortly. Nice. And we're really excited about it. We think that we've got an opportunity to fundamentally really impact what's a very broken system. And again, our focus is going to be on probation and parole, where it's 2/3 of the people in the criminal justice system. It's 4.5 million people. I think if you did this right, you might have half or even 2/3 less people. We'll still keep the neighborhoods equally as safe and making a more efficient government and a more productive individuals. And so we're focused on doing it. And I think Meek's really charged up. This is a guy who, he just launched a hit album days ago, and he's here talking about criminal justice reform because that's how much he cares about it.
Well, we really, really appreciate it. So thank you very much. And
all right, thank you, Patty.
We will now be taking a short break. Programming will resume at 4:05 p.m.
your number, be a friend undercover. But you laugh when I'm trying to stay cool. I was never looking for love until I met you. I was just a walker right through. Everyone was staring at you. I always wish that I could say hi with you. I always wish that I could say hi with you. I was never looking for love. I was never looking for love. Hey, stranger, will ever get to move on you? Hey, stranger, will ever get to move on you? I was never looking for love until I met you. I was just a walker right through. Everyone was staring at you. I always wish that I could say hi with you. I always wish that I could say hi with you. I was never looking for love. 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 I was never looking for love.
Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The program will begin in 5 minutes. Please welcome Aaron Samuels and Brian Logan.
Aaron Samuels.
Hey, am I on?
Thanks
All right.
Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
You have such an interesting story, a fascinating story. Raised in Rhode Island, college in St. Louis, Missouri. You worked on Wall Street, wrote some books, traveled the world, and now you're running this media company, Blavity, in Los Angeles with 50 employees, raising $6.5 million just this past July with Google Ventures.
That's been crazy.
And you're not even 30 years old.
Yes, that is
amazing.
True.
It's
Yeah,
like I
yeah.
said, it's amazing. So we saw the video there about the different brands that live under the Blavity name, and you talked about empowering people to tell their own story and to own their own narrative. And so, can you talk about how you execute that principle as it relates to developing those brands?
Yeah, that's a lot. Owning my own narrative, building a company. I'm still a little starstruck. I'm a big 50 Cent fan, so I was just like, this is crazy to be having this conversation after that conversation. Of course, I want to say, okay, well, my story is similar. And in some ways it is, in some ways it's not similar at all. But I did start my career as an artist. And I started as a poet, doing spoken word poetry, growing up in Providence, Rhode Island. And most of my poetry was written about identity. I grew up in a multiracial, multi-faith household, black and Jewish, with two parents who were both clinical psychologists. Yeah, right, so I got some laughs probably from people who are either psychologists or know some psychologists. And so when both of your parents are psychologists, what that means is that basically, sorry, is my mic on now? Is that what's going on? All right. So let's use this instead. Is this better? Great. Sorry about that. So for those of you who couldn't hear me, both my parents were clinical psychologists. And what that meant is that every night when I came home after school, we would talk about emotions. So my parents would say, okay, what'd you do today? I'd say, I did this, I went to track, or I went to theater or something. And then they'd say, okay, great, how did that make you feel? I'd say, well, I really enjoy running faster than my peers. It makes me feel good. Not so good at theater, that makes me feel bad. And they'd say, great, why did it make you feel that way? And so when you do this every day for 18 years, you really start, developing a methodology for kind of interpreting your own emotions, knowing what you're feeling, why you're feeling it, and for being able to have conversations with other people about what they're feeling and why they're feeling. So then when I was a teenager, I got really involved in spoken word poetry. And through that process, I learned a lot about the power of telling your own story, especially for people of color and for any underrepresented group in this country. Your story is a lot of times thrown on you by other people, whether that's based on their own stereotypes or their own experiences. But that's not with you. That's with other people that they think are like you, that they think you represent. When you take control of your own narrative and your own story, what that enables you to do is it changes the way you see yourself, and it changes the way that others see you. So I learned that lesson as a child, and I spent many years writing poetry and traveling and having these conversations. But I was talking to Brian about this, and the way that made me feel is that I was having a big impact in lots of little rooms. When you're doing kind of poetry and you're having conversations in bookstores or at bars or at college campuses, the impact was palpable, but it was tiny, and I wanted to find a way to scale that. So after working on we're doing financial consulting for a little bit at Bain & Company. Some of my college friends reached out to me, Morgan in particular, and said that she was interested in starting a media company. And at first, I wasn't sure that a media company was what I wanted to do. But then she basically said, "We're going to do everything that you love, Aaron. We're going to tell stories, specifically tell stories of people that are part of the African diaspora. And what we're going to do is we're going to combine that with sustainable business strategy, so that we can empower our community." And I said, "Yeah, I'm down for that." And that's kind of what brought me to the company.
Can you just talk briefly about why it's important to focus on African American millennials?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of reasons, both from kind of a social good standpoint, but also from a, like, let's make a good business standpoint. Black people drive culture. Everybody knows this. Everybody knows this in their heart and in their soul, especially black people. Whether you're looking at trends, and this is trends in technology, in music, in pop culture, basically since the beginning of this country, and probably before that too. The problem is, what happens is a lot of times, mainstream culture looks at the trends that black people are creating, and then profits off of them, and then black people don't actually capture the value of the things that they're creating. And I think this is a problem. A lot of people do. So what we wanted to do is try to find a way to say, okay, let's look at black entrepreneurs, let's look at black artists, let's look at black storytellers, and find a way to systemically create business models, or at least create the beginning of a business conversation around, okay, what does it mean for us to capture the value that we are actually creating ourselves? So that's the business answer. In terms of the why do I care, that's simpler. Which I believe in storytelling, and I believe in looking out for my people. And I think that it's really important, at least for me, that I have a career where I'm always doing something that I believe is giving back to people that I care about and to communities that I value.
So I think better than a lot of people how difficult it is to build a media company in this environment. And you encountered some pretty big challenges. You started in 2014. Can you talk about some of those challenges?
Sure. So do we have any entrepreneurs in the room? Got a couple? Yeah, okay. So you all probably relate to what I'm talking about, which is the first step is the hardest one. You're trying to get from 0 to 1. And when we started in 2014, we started running the company. We didn't have experience raising venture capital dollars. We didn't have experience running successful companies. And we were 4 black people, all representing very different types of black people, but 4 black people nonetheless. A little bit of privilege. We were college educated. We had some tech experience and some business experience. But then when we said to investors, hey, we want to create a company for black people, a lot of investors were not interested. And you hear things that is coded language. The market's too small is one that we heard a lot, which is an absurd question when you look at the buying power of black millennials, of black people at large. Or, I don't see how it's a sustainable business model is another one you get a lot, which the reality is, no startup really has a sustainable business model. So, you hear a lot of these things, and then what we basically decided to do was, plow forward anyway. So we said, okay, we're gonna run it for 2 years without investment capital and see where this goes. And in order to do that, we just had to make some difficult financial decisions. One of which was our first office space when we finally opened it in Los Angeles. It was like in this warehouse building, and we had this one big kind of suite, and we put up like a temporary wall that cut off a third of that office, and then that became Morgan's bedroom. And then there was like a raised storage unit inside that bedroom. It was really like a raised closet. It was 6 by 6 by 11. And I turned that into my bedroom. And we put
Morgan DeBon, the CEO.
Morgan DeBon, the CEO, right. So I'm living here with my boss / co-founder, and then the rest of the company is like one wall away, and we're just in the office. Never stopped working. And it's also painful. Morgan, incredible CEO. And she is a morning person, for sure. So Morgan is up at 5 o'clock in the morning, every morning, and I am not a morning person. I'm a night person. I get my creativity and my energy at night, so I'm usually working until 2 a.m., 3 a.m., and I'm trying to pass out, and then Morgan is up at 5, starting the day, and we... it was efficient for a company because basically we only had 2 hours of downtime every day. but for personal health, it took a toll. And so, the big question that you always ask yourself is, okay, can we get out of this hustle phase? You got to do it, you got to commit until we can find a way to get it to sustainability, to whether that means get it to a sustainable revenue strategy or get enough user base, or at least get enough people to believe so that you can raise investment capital. And the first kind of 2 to 3 years of the company was about us proving that to the market and also us proving that to ourselves.
What did it feel like when you raised your first $1 million?
Yeah, it was wild. It was Q1 2016. And in some ways, and this is one of the hardest things for for entrepreneurs and for artists as well, is that a lot of times you know that you have something great before the market does. So when we raised our first million, that was in some ways getting market validation, which was great because it's good to have capital, but it wasn't a signal to us that we had something good. We knew that we had something good. It was more a signal that, honestly, that non-black people understood that we had something good as well, which is important. And it's important to do business, to be able to have a client base and to be able to operate and to be able to have contracts with vendors. But for us, we'd already decided to push forward well before that point.
So you raised, as I mentioned earlier, $6.5 million in your Series A round with Google Ventures in July.
Yes.
When we last spoke, you talked about the challenge of remaining an authentic company even as you grow. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, it's something that we think about a lot. And already the authenticity question is very top of mind for me. As a black person that has a stake in this community, I care a lot about authenticity. But also, as a mixed race, light-skinned, cisgendered, able-bodied, athletic male with a lot of masculine privilege and straight privilege in the world, I also recognize that a lot of those other things helped me, do what I do here, and also enabled me to have certain privileges that allow me to walk in spaces like this that a lot of other people don't, that my cousins don't necessarily have, or that my brother doesn't necessarily have access to, these weird privileges. And those things can also end up biasing content, can bias business decisions, et cetera. And so the important part is to always look at your privileges and look at your oppressions simultaneously, and to make sure that bias is being checked regularly. So one of the things that I care a lot about and that we really try to do as a business practice at Blavity is to make sure that we are always on the pulse of what's happening in the community broadly, which means lots of opinions, which means making sure we're prioritizing hiring young black people, that we're having conversations with people that are in college, that are in high school, that are on the street, that are looking at all of the different things that are happening so that we're constantly getting that news. Because the second that you get disconnected from the community, I believe is the second that you become inauthentic. And we have a business model that centers authenticity so much that's always got to be a priority for us.
I'm just going to read a quote from our last talk. We talked in LA in October. The quote is, I'm really excited about the next phase for our company. I'm also terrified. What was on your mind when you said that?
Yeah, I am terrified. It's hard. The last 4 years have been such a wild ride, going from 4 co-founders who were all, we were all really good friends in college. It was like a family. There was complete and absolute trust between us, and still is. They're just more than us 4 now. Now we're about 50 employees, and we're operating in 2 different parts of the country and throwing events all over the place. And so in order for us to get to the next stage as a company, it's going to require a lot of letting go of control, letting go of complete autonomy for all of us, for me, Morgan, for Jeff, and thinking about, okay, what we really need to do now is trust our team, is trust our clients, trust our partners, and say, okay, we've created something beautiful. We've had honest conversations about what our values are. So now we need to take a step back and kind of allow things to run. And for somebody, I'm chief operating officer. My job is to make sustainable systems. So one of the scariest things is to create a system and then say, okay, now I'm not in the weeds anymore. What's going to happen? And it's going to require a lot of that over the next 4 years if we're going to continue to grow and scale the way that we want to.
All right, and just last question. As you know, I always like to do a fun question at the very end. So what song or songs reminds you of starting your company? So 2014, what takes you back to those first days?
It's probably Black Beatles by Ray Shrumman. I don't know if y'all were part of this. There was like a Twitter moment, Twitter period of time where everybody was doing the Black Beatles challenge where the song would play and then everybody would freeze in a room And you just kind of like get a camera shot that pans the entire room. And I remember it was one of the first things that we did when we moved into our new office, and we did that as a company. So we like participated in the Black Beatles Challenge, and it was just beautiful to have. I think we were about 10 or 11 people at this point, and we were able to participate in Black Twitter, which is exactly what we wanted to be a part of.
Very nice. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you. Thank you.
Welcome to Hello Sunshine.
You did it, girl. And you nailed it.
Hi, everybody.
Hello, Sunshine.
How you doing? Hello Sunshine is a storytelling brand. We create content by and for women.
That's ridiculous. Like, who would do that?
It ranges from short-form social content to episodic television to motion pictures.
What was I like when I was younger? You were a lot of fun, but you were a brat.
Like literally a brat. Some of the newest, most creative voices on YouTube, social media, and in Hollywood are women. Hello Sunshine is going to give them a place to shine. We're determined to create inspiring, fun, informative content that will spread contagious joy.
I've chased after rainbows. I've captured one or two.
Yeah.
And I've reached for the stars, and I've even held a few.
I'm Reese Witherspoon, and I'm excited for you to get to know Hello Sunshine.
Do you think you see a change coming?
There is a shift happening, and I can feel it.
Yeah.
And it's time.
Please welcome Sarah Harden and Stephanie Mehta.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hi, Sarah.
Hey, hi there. It's nice to be here.
Thanks for being here, and thanks for taking some time to share a little bit of the Hello Sunshine story with us. We just saw a really great video featuring your very famous co-founder.
Yes.
And wanted to spend a little time talking about what it's like to build a media company in the sort of post-digital age.
Yeah.
Company was founded in 2016. What advantages do you have as such a new company that even some of those digitally native companies like Netflix and Amazon Prime and Hulu don't have? What are the advantages that you have being so young?
Well, I love even being mentioned in the same sentence as those companies. But I think when Reese and I first met and we talked about founding the company, there were a couple of things. One is being very wary of founding a media brand in what is an incredibly noisy content landscape. And I think one of the advantages, I think the first one was this was not a standing start. I think this company is an extension of Reese's lifelong career, and both as an actress, but then, over many years as a leading producer, and I think with Gone Girl and Wild and Big Little Lies, I think this was the next step in that. And then I think the other advantage was the freedom to start and architect a company for this moment in time. The downside of a clean sheet of paper is just that, but the upside is, there's no legacy infrastructure, there's no legacy cap table that you were built for a business model that valued different things. And I think when we started the company, we said we want to be very intentional about how we build a company in today's media landscape and trying to be mindful of where we thought it was going. And really architect it around that. What was the next 10 years going to bring? And if we were going to build what we hope is a really meaningful consumer brand for women anchored in storytelling, like how should we go about it? And so I think that was the real advantage.
And so from a structural standpoint,
Yeah.
that means partnering a lot as opposed to finding exclusively your own distribution channels. Talk a little bit about what you look for in partners.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I think for us, the vision, the vision of our company is to change the narrative for women through storytelling and to build that across all storytelling platforms where women are spending their time. So it's everything from our daily social content in Instagram and Facebook and YouTube and Twitter to our feature film and TV slate. And so I think what we've tried to do is be very intentional about those content swim lanes. And in the middle of that, we have long-form audio, we have unscripted content, long-form audio storytelling podcasts. So for us, as we look at that, both how we internally resource that and looking for those partners that are right for each of those channels. So, on the film and television side, that's a very specific set of partners, and I think even the TV marketplace is so different even the last 2 or 3 years. I think from unscripted to social, we really have a goal to try and reach consumers directly under our own brand with our content. So we did things like launch a Hello Sunshine On Demand channel across the DirecTV footprint with 2 unscripted shows, and this was Reese's first unscripted series called Shine On With Reese, which the intention of that show was to have a different conversation about female ambition. And so in each of those, we've gone out and set up, I think, we've set up intentional partnerships and trying to do few things well in each one of those swim lanes. Those partners are different across each of those.
And how do you think about when to deploy Reese and when not to deploy Reese? Shine On With Reese is obviously something that was a passion project of hers. She's the front woman. She's very involved in it. But you must get a lot of requests for her time.
Yeah.
The company is called Hello Sunshine, not the Reese Witherspoon company. So how do you balance the demands and the requests for her time versus creating a brand that can live beyond its founder?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things when we first started talking about the ambition for the company was, I mean, it's part of our mission that this, and Reese very centrally said, this company is not about me. She didn't need to found a company to create opportunities for herself. Those were all there, and she was architecting and authoring those in her producing activities as well. It was very central that this company was about how do we put a mission control under this brand that we can bring to life stories and perspectives that give women in front of and behind the camera an opportunity to bring their stories into a marketplace, which frankly, we saw a huge white space in that. And so all the conversations with Reese are the highest and best use of her time. How does she, I mean, you see her face and what she's involved in, like she's involved in every aspect of the company behind the scenes as well. And I mean, I don't know how she does it. She's the hardest working person I know. And so where she shows up publicly, we have those discussions. She's obviously, I mean, she's very active as an actress, and but she's sort of doing it all at the same time. And similarly, an example is our podcast. She convenes our podcast. She introduces at the front. She sets the stage on our first podcast about why this was a podcast called How It Is, which we're excited was named one of the Apple's best of 2018 podcasts today. She introduced it. She introduced the host. So she's not hosting the podcast, but we see her as she's the convener of all the storytelling we do. And but that's a daily, weekly, monthly conversation. But the core ambition for the company is to create opportunities and build a very sustainable business where we can bring stories to life that are not around Reese. So, our film and TV slate, we've got many projects that don't involve her. She's actively producing every single one of them, but she's not necessarily starring in every single one of them.
Why do you think the time is right for the kind of storytelling you're doing at Hello Sunshine? I mean, there have been women-focused networks, women-focused magazines. There's always been a space for stories for and about women, but Hello Sunshine has a very specific kind of story it wants to tell. And I hope you could talk a little bit about what that is and why the time might be right for it.
It's interesting because I think part of our goal and our mission is to bring to life different perspectives, different stories, different narratives for women. And I think the opportunity we saw early on, even in a crowded landscape, you start with film and television, but you roll it forward. There are too few stories where you have women driving the action. Women have been the side characters, and not exclusively so, but we saw incredible, I mean, a lot of our film and TV, we draw from beautiful books and IP, so the opportunity to bring these to life with excellence, and there's room for excellent storytelling. So how do we find that combination of IP, talent, the right partners? I think the other thing, and that continues whether it's our podcasting slate, but it also continues, I think, in this world where we're all trying to authentically connect with an audience. We think that if the way we author content shows up in your storytelling, audiences are so smart and they can smell it. And we also focus on the process of authorship of storytelling, because I think we're in an industry at every level especially in the more traditional media, like for years, women have been structurally silenced from authorship. Whether you look at female directors, whether you look at below the line, whether you look at writers' rooms, and it's even worse for people of color, otherized perspectives. And I think we have a fundamental core belief that if we fix authorship, it will show up, and we produce everything with care and intention, and we're still trying to be original and surprising and excellent, because that's what it takes. And whether that's a daily social post or whether that's a feature film, we just have a long-term belief that that will show up in the way we can connect with audiences. And so I think, and it's really that belief that drives us. And we're trying to put our heads down and just, it's really hard to make anything great, and we're just trying to put our heads down right now and make great content and find ways to serve that that our women are going to just love.
For those in the room who haven't spent a lot of time engaging with Hello Sunshine content, can you give us an example of a piece of content that you think is either exemplary of what the brand is trying to put out into the world, or something that you and the team are particularly proud of?
Oh, there's so much. We have so much in production and underway right now. I was like Shine On with Reese. I was really, that came from an essay that Reese wrote in Glamour magazine a couple of years ago. And it was really the notion around ambition is not a dirty word. And we wanted to tell a different narrative about female ambition. Like, I think sometimes the stories of ambition and entrepreneurship, they're centered on the coasts. They're centered in tech, and they're centered in, and so, we went out, and Reese really went out, and we talked from Dolly Parton to Sarah Blakely to Ava DuVernay, Cleo Wade, Elaine Welteroth, Glennon Doyle, Abby Wambach. Simone Askew, who's the first African-American captain at West Point who commanded 4,000 cadets, 21 years old. And these are women who are excellent in their own right, but they have just unbelievable stories and that felt so relatable. And I'm really proud with what we did with that series. I'm proud of our podcast, how it is. Again, we had an intention there. We just wanted you to hear different women's voices on every podcast. And so we have 3 different women on every podcast telling, the sort of underlying thesis of that is we're all experts in our own lives. And if you want to know something, what do? You should just ask another woman. And so I'm sort of proud of how carefully we curated those. And I'm really proud of our film and TV slate. I mean, Lauren Levy-Newstatter, who runs our film and TV business, working day in, day out with Reese on that. Creatively, I think the projects that we've set up that we've into next year and the year after, many of which we've announced, I feel like we just have a sort of passion bar in the company. As if we're going to do something, we're all in. And I do think part of the vision for our company is not only are we selling film and television and producing those shows, but as a brand and as a company, we take responsibility for helping audiences show up. And so, as you look at a book like Little Fires Everywhere, which we picked as a Reese's Book Club pick last September on its published date, we packaged that. Kerry Washington Reese is starring in it. We sold it to Hulu. You can bet by the time it airs on Hulu in a year or two, that we're going to be bringing our community, our book club community, who've seen the evolution and us talk about and celebrate that book, and Celeste Ng, the author, and it's an amazing book about race and motherhood and identity. It's going to have been a 2.5-year conversation by the time that shows up with Hulu. And so part of our promise to Hulu is we're going to bring our audience and help drive them to you, because everyone in this landscape, whether you're again trying to get people to go sit in a movie theater or show up for a show on a streaming platform or find you on social, I think part of that's how we define our company as we think the modern media brand and studio.
And is that part of the appeal for the partner, that by working with you, you're not just getting the rights to the book, you're also getting the Hello Sunshine audience?
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly our vision, and at the end of the day, where we've set up a film and TV slate is it's the quality of that IP, and then the job Reese and Lauren do in putting those elements together, and the conviction and belief, we're going to do everything in our power to make that show incredible. And, but we have work to do yet. We're really 18, 19 months old as a company. I'm thrilled with how we're building that deep connection with our audience very intentionally through our book club handles and our Hello Sunshine handles. But that's a 10-year journey we're on. We're building this company for the long term. And I think for us, we're trying to build, you know, I'd rather have a million women who follow us, who love everything we do and show up for us, than sort of 50 million likes across, you know, a more ephemeral relationship. So that was the intention we set out to build the brand. You know, we're not at the sort of publishing CPM end of the spectrum, but we are trying to build that direct audience.
Have you had in your short life as a company a fail fast moment or a project that you cut off because it wasn't true to the brand?
Oh, sure. And look, I think the early days, it's so interesting. Like, you know, part of like any company that I think is in this business is you have to foster a culture of creativity and risk-taking. And I mean, when we first launched our Hello Sunshine socials, a lot of it was like, for me, it's like, guys, I want you to have the freedom to prototype in public. You have to do that if you're going to be. And then, you know, I look at some of our early social posts and I got a couple of calls from a couple of our board members on things like, what the hell are you doing? And I realized it was, you know, I think part of that was not being intentional enough about what we were trying to say. And we have an unbelievably creative team. And so trying to get that mix always right, which is building a brand really deliberately, but making sure that you have a culture which encourages that. And thankfully, a lot of these digital platforms do allow for that. But look, we do have I think for us, we're building a culture of excellence, which means naming something when it's great and really naming it when it's not. And so we will kill a lot of things, even if we've taken them down the track before they're with an audience, or we'll find a way to test them with an audience in a lower risk way. But we're going to have failures. You can't bet 100 in the content business. And I think with every intention, you know, we're swinging for the fences, but we're going to have things that don't work because it's the nature of the creative business. And so I certainly have a culture that encourages, we try and setting a culture that encourages that.
What attracted you to the CEO position at Hello Sunshine? What was it that made you decide to take what is a leap? It's a small company, you're building from the ground up.
You know, when I met Reese, I was running Otter Media, and so I was her investor when we started the company. And, you know, we worked on the business plan together, and, you know, one of my team was the first employee of Hello Sunshine. And then I ended up rolling in as CEO. And, you know, the only way I can describe it is we were building the company and I was helping her build the team. Every day I would drive to the Hello Sunshine office and I would feel this, I couldn't think of anything else I wanted to do more than build this company. And the timing was really right. And I think I was really fortunate in building Otter and building next generation media brands that I've been doing for a number of years. I just felt like I had this combination of skill sets. If Hello Sunshine was an outgrowth of Reese's lifelong work as an actress and producer and businesswoman, and she's just got such an amazing brain and curiosity and lover of books. Like, I think for me, it was a set of skills that I thought that we had a shot at building and building a new brand. And I think then, you know, 12 months later, after we started the company, we had this different cultural conversation around Me Too and Time's Up, which didn't shift our strategy at all, but it just added a level of urgency and just a level of conviction that we were on the right track. I mean, I believe that storytelling can shift culture, and culture can shift the way women get to walk through this world. And along the way, we can entertain and connect and celebrate with each other, and then also bring. I mean, there's such amazing storytellers, voices, authors, writers, and it's a privilege to sit at a company where we get a chance to bring their works to life. So I can't think of anything else I'd rather be doing.
We started the conversation by talking about the kind of companies you aren't. You're not a legacy media company. Yeah. You don't have a lot of the trappings of those legacy media companies, and yet you partner with a lot of the big and established brands. What do you admire about those who've come before you? What are whether it's in media or technology or other companies, what do you aspire to that you see in some of the other companies that you partner with or those that have established in this business?
Oh, look, so much. We're still a really small company. And so when I look at...
How many employees are you now?
We're about 30 people. And an early brand, we're 18 months in. And look, I look at companies with the legacies of Disney and Warner's, and I think one is to maintain cultures that put talent at the center and really honor creativity, and at the same time match that with a culture that's about executional excellence and rigor. And I think getting that balance is really hard. And I think companies that have built these consumer brands over decades, who've known what they're about, and frankly have had to really shift as the marketplace has shifted. And look, even to I look at those brands, and I think for us to build, a decades-long effort will be to build, I think, IP and storytelling franchises that people love, that they seek out, and that's sort of our clear-eyed view. And we're just very focused day to day on executing, and I feel like if we can do that, always mindful, and I think companies that do this really well are really notable, always mindful of who we're serving, and that we serve an audience who are busy and have got so much going on in their lives and want a little joy and want a little fun. And I think sometimes we believe that we can watch something substantive and feel something substance and also laugh at the same time with a dog with a pink shower cap on its head. We can hold those two things together. So, we can, and that's sort of at the heart of the storytelling we want to do. It's got some meaning, but we're an entertainment brand as well. And I look at so many of the companies that do that well, not to mention those companies been built in the last 10 years, finding ways to really serve a consumer. Netflix, Apple, many others, and many other earlier stage companies as well. I'm a student of the marketplace for sure.
Well, as you said, it all starts with intentionality, and we were so happy to have you with us today. Sarah Harden,
thank you
CEO
so much.
of Hello Sunshine.
Thank you. Thanks, Stephanie.
Please welcome Sir Martin Sorrell and Jim Edwards.
All right.
Do you want this, Jim?
No, I'm good, thank you.
You sure?
First of all, thank you very much for doing this.
Obviously been a long day for everybody.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, we had Meek Mill, we had 50 Cent, and finally we have arrived at the headline act.
This is the end.
Yeah. So I wanted the theme of this panel to be reinvention because you are now in...
Is it a panel? Is there somebody here I've missed?
Oh, wow.
Is somebody under the
I wanted this chat.
Okay.
The theme of this chat to be about reinvention because you're now in the third act of your very impressive career. Very briefly, some history. You joined Saatchi & Saatchi in 1975 as its finance director and effectively became the third Saatchi brother and built that company.
There were a lot of other third Saatchi brothers. Tim Bell would be very upset with you, so would Bill Muirhead, Jeremy
Nonetheless,
Sinclair, God knows how many other people.
You helped them with their acquisition strategy and you built that brand into the brand that we know it is today. In '85, you left to start WPP with, if I get this right, 2 employees in a single room.
There were 3 of us in one room, that's correct.
Okay. It's now, WPP is now the world's largest ad agency network.
It is no longer the world's largest agency. It lost that crown to Omnicom a few weeks ago.
Oh, okay.
If you
but nonetheless, 21 billion in revenue.
Yes.
Okay, 21 billion in revenue, 130,000 employees. I think there was a period where you were acquiring companies at a rate of 50 a year.
That's probably an exaggeration. You're usually not prone to exaggeration, but that's probably an exaggeration.
All right.
I think we certainly were doing a large number of small ones to be.
Okay. But some major ones. You acquired J. Walter Thompson, Ogilvy, Hilden Knowlton, Burson Marsteller, Xaxis, Kantar, and it also had...
They weren't in separate transactions. Let's get the precise, because...
I'm just doing a potted history.
No, the potted history, no, seriously, because it's important. It's JWT in '87, Ogilvy in 89, Y&R in 2000. I think Gray was 2005. Those were the sort of four big key ones. And the reason why it's important...
That's nonetheless very fast succession.
Yeah, but the reason it's important, Jim, is that, you know, there's a lot written by... You're not a lazy journalist, but there are lazy journalists around. And, you know, there was an article a week or so ago talking about the merger of JWT and Wonderman. And the journalist can, you know, sort of is and VML... VML with Y&R, and they get mixed up about where the various parts of these companies came from, and they talk about the value of Y&R Group when they're actually talking about Y&R Advertising Agency, because this is a really important point. What's happened in our industry in the last 20 or 30 years is that those agency groups that existed, like JWT Group or Y&R or Ogilvy or Gray, which were mini WPPs, have been sort of broken into parts. So, for example, inside Ogilvy and JWT in 87 and 89 were the media businesses, which form Mindshare. Mindshare has been removed, in a sense, and put into Group M. So when you talk about Ogilvy and compare it today to what it was in 1989, it's a totally different business.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm just trying to give the audience that may not know the history of WPP.
No,
like the scale of what you have done is what I'm attempting to do. Okay. And I will finish and ask you a proper question in a minute.
Right.
So
I was waiting for
you were, so you were the CEO of this company for 33 years. You were the longest serving of any CEO in the FTSE 100. Is that right?
I think, yes, Martin Gilbert at Aberdeen Standard would probably claim that crown too.
You were also, at one point, the highest compensated executive in Britain. And earlier this year, you left WPP. Oh, I thought you were going to argue with me about that.
No. I mean, when you use the word compensated, and you know, usually people say they talk about pay, and they forget about the performance bit. I mean, the reason that the compensation was high was it was tied virtually totally to performance.
Right, and your own money was at stake, right? I was not going to ask you about this, but now you're on.
Absolutely, no.
So to get that package, you had to buy your own stock.
Well, it's
and
not.
have it at risk,
Again,
right?
you describe it as a package. I fundamentally believe that founders or entrepreneurs, the word entrepreneur means risk taker, which means put your money where your mouth is. It doesn't mean, you know, as Warren Buffett pointed out many years ago, options are heads I win, tails you lose. And he said you wouldn't give an institution a 10-year call on your stock, so why should you do it at zero cost?
Yeah.
So why should you do it with management? The critical point is that people make a commitment to the company. That is the founder mentality. When people use the word, I want to be or say, I want to be an entrepreneur, what they're actually, inside large companies, what they're actually saying is, I want to be autonomous. Leave me alone. Give me a budget. If I hit the budget, you know, leave me alone. If I don't, you know, you can replace me. But there's a difference between autonomy and entrepreneurialism. Entrepreneurialism means putting your money, making a commitment where your mouth is.
Okay. And we're going to get to that in just a moment, because you left WPP earlier this year under difficult circumstances, and you've started a third act, or a new era, S4 Capital, and today, in fact, you've closed a deal on buying your second agency, right?
Yeah.
Mighty High.
I wouldn't call it an agency. Mighty High, Pete Kim, at Mighty High would be very upset if you'd call him an agency. He would call himself a programmatic consultancy, which I think is slightly different.
Okay, so you're building this brand new thing. It's all digital. It's a completely new model.
Purely digital, yeah.
It's already sort of impressively taking shape at speed. And you know, my question is, when you left WPP, you chose to leave, but it looked as if you were forced to leave. And that company, biggest in the world at the time, it only exists because you made it exist. Those people only have jobs because you created those jobs. You must be furious.
No, I mean, that's hyperbole. You know, my mother, if she was still alive, bless her, would be delighted to hear you say that. But, you know, look, there were 4,999 other people. If you included associates, it was something like 200,000 people in 113 countries. I'm very proud of what the company did over those 33 years. To say I'm furious, I'm disappointed. I mean, you asked me in the green room, you know, what my feelings were about it. On Bloomberg, I've said sad, which is one way of putting it. Disappointed is another part of it. When I look at, for example, some of the things surrounding Carlos Ghosn, and we don't know the deep reasons why that has happened. You know, I sort of see sort of strains of what happened in relation to Renault and Nissan and the Japanese, if I read it correctly. And I sort of see strains like that. I mean, it's an interesting situation to compare. I mean, it's a very different in terms of scale and importance. I mean, we're, to use the vernacular, a peanut in comparison. But, you know, I see elements of it that remind me of some of the things going on at WPP.
Okay. And when you left, and I'm
can I expand on that a little bit? Sure. Yeah, because I think it is important. In the UK system, you have non-executive chairmen and CEOs. The US system, you have a more unitary system in that you have a chairman and CEO, usually, although increasingly it's going the other way.
Right.
What you get as a result in the UK is a split between sort of the chairman through the general counsel, that's sort of what I would call process,
yeah,
and performance, CEO through management. And you tend to get sort of twin pillars. If the chairman has not got the T-shirt, or he or she is not comfortable in his or her own skin, putting it sort of generally, you get some tension as a result.
Now that tension is supposed to be healthy, right? Because
well, I think it can be very unhealthy because you can't have two bosses in a business.
Okay, but the flip side of that would be exactly what's happening at Facebook right now, where Mark Zuckerberg is the founder and the CEO and the executive chairman, and you know, has slightly lost the plot there, and also cannot be held accountable by his own shareholders.
It's a slight difference there because what he has is a golden share. I mean, with S4 Capital, have what is known as a B share, which gives me certain rights as a core shareholder. And you know, I've tried to develop a structure there where I have considerable influence. In the fullness of time, that might change. We'll have to see what happens and how fast the company grows. And you know, we have a standard listing at the moment in the UK on the London Stock Exchange. To go to a premium listing would necessitate us changing the governance. But we'll see how that pans out. But it's slightly different with Mark Zuckerberg. As I understand it, he has control, as do Larry and Sergey at Google, and Jeff Bezos at Amazon. So in the troika, in the three of the principal digital companies, you have that structure. And in fact, others too.
Okay. So I'm... One more question on your departure, and then we'll move on. And I'm sort of required by journalistic law to ask you this.
No, this is a test of your journalistic manhood that you're referring to. If you don't ask this question...
I'm just going to read the question.
And I have the good answer to it.
Okay, we'll get to the answer eventually. You were accused by colleagues of misusing your company's expenses for personal travel and also visiting an address in Mayfair's red light district. Why do you think those people made those allegations?
You had to ask them.
This is your chance.
Ask them. You know, do you know what happened? Do you remember what happened, Jim?
Well, I wasn't there.
No. Do you remember what happened finally?
I believe the process? You asked for some sort of internal investigation that never happened.
No, not true.
Set the record straight,
Research,
please.
Right. So there was an investigation. What did that investigation find?
There was no material issue.
Right. Thank you. Finished.
Okay.
What did I go as? Just one other point. I went as a good leaver, correct?
Yes, that's right.
Enough said.
Okay. So you've started this new thing, S4. This is your third start, essentially. Why do it a third time? Why not just retire to the big house in Oxfordshire and watch cricket?
I don't have a big house in Oxfordshire. There are people I know that like to have a house.
I know, but that's sort of a typical British CEO thing to do, is to...
No, well, actually, Liam Fox, in the context of Brexit, said that British businessmen on a, I don't think he said British businesswomen. British businessmen on a Friday afternoon would be playing golf instead of going out to build their businesses in the Brixton Next 11, which they would have to do after Brexit. Now,
and he said they were rubbish at trade too, even though he was.
Yeah, I think a little bit unfair. But you know what he was pointing out, which I think is right, is that we have to get off our backsides post Brexit, and change the pattern of trade from Europe, the big four: Germany, France, Italy, and Spain, where 40% of our, or the EU, where 40% of our trade takes place, and go to these other countries. And we haven't been very good at doing it. If that was the point of his what he said, I think is probably correct in that. Having said that, you know, retirement is something that won't suit me. I don't like the idea of doing portfolio stuff. I don't like the idea of playing golf. I worked for Mark McCormack for many years. I think golf is for old men, not necessarily for young men. Or people who think they're younger.
And you must just enjoy it as well.
No, I think that's exactly the reason I do enjoy it.
I mean, you obviously get a thrill from these deals and this empire.
Well, it's not a question of the deals. I mean, you and I were talking about this in the green room. You know, what would be the measure of success? And you asked me, how big do we want to make S4 Capital? And I said, you can never say that. If you'd asked me at Saatchi's when I was supposedly the third brother, which I wasn't, I was one of about 7 or 8 third brothers. Or if you asked me at WPP after six months, you know, we're 6 months into S4 Capital, if you said, what do you think WPP would have been, or Warren Plastic Products at that time, the answer is I don't know. The acid test of what we do is whether it generates significant differentiation. You know, when I was at WPP in the last year or 2 years, what did I see as significant differentiation? Hogarth and what it was doing in content production. Xaxis and what it was doing in programmatic, maybe with Essence as well. And then thirdly, digital agencies that were going into clients through the digital door and mushrooming into more traditional media.
Are you doing things with S4 that you could not?
So what we're trying to do with S4 is to do exactly that. The acid test of S4 will not be acquiring Media Monks, not acquiring Mighty Hive or merging with them, however you put it. The acid test will be whether the combination works effectively with clients, whether it is correctly analyzed what clients want, what they think they want, how they're implementing it, and how we go forward.
And is S4 competing against WPP?
Look, I've said it, a peanut. You know, we're if you do the pro formas on Mighty Hive and Media Monks, it's a $150 million business, making about 30 million EBITDA before central overheads. How can that compare to a company which is $20 billion in revenue and was making $2.5 billion or whatever it was?
Well, they have you. I mean, that's a slight advantage.
Sorry?
You literally know everybody on the planet.
I wish I did. I don't. I know a few. And that's, you know, that's an interesting point, because the ability to introduce people or to have access is one half of the equation. The other half of the equation is the ability to convert. I mean, it's all very well turning up, but you have to win. And I think that's the critically important thing.
Why is it called S4?
S4 is, well, my grandparents came, on my father's side, came to the UK in 1899 from Kiev. On my mother's side, between the two wars, from Romania and from Poland. So my grandparents were foreigners, immigrants. My father was first generation. I'm second generation. My kids are third generation. My grandchildren are fourth generation. So S4 stands for Sorrell for fourth generations, or 4 generations. The S also stands not just for Sorrell, but the name that my father had before, which he changed in the 20s, when there was a considerable amount of anti-Semitism in the UK. It was fairly common for Jews to change their name, rightly or wrongly, to try and diminish the level of anti-Semitism. He read a book by a man called Warwick Deeping, which was called Sorrell and Son. Loved the book, which was about the relationship between a man and his son, and decided to change his name in that way.
What was his original name?
Spitzberg.
Okay. And you talk to your dad every day before he...
Yes, I mean, I had an incredibly close relationship. I mean, this is before the days of mobile phones, so I would speak to him. You know, everybody, I think, has to have somebody they can talk to who does not have an agenda, who has your interests at heart, and can give you advice with that as background. And I think anybody who runs a business benefits from that. So I used to talk to my dad. I mean, he knew nothing particularly about the advertising and marketing services businesses. He ran a chain of 750 retail shops, radio and electrical shops. But what he did do is have a very acute, his greatest, he had two great gifts. One, he always had time for anything. And secondly, he had a tremendous understanding of people and how they reacted to words, gestures, conversation, whatever. So tremendous understanding of people. Maybe that was because he was in retail, knew consumers, knew people that worked in the business very well. So I think those two things were really, really outstanding. And I used to talk to him, I'm not exaggerating, 4 or 5 times a day, even at the height of so-called hostile takeovers like JWT in 1987 or Ogilvy in 89. He died in 89 after Ogilvy. Even in the height of those things, I would talk to him on a regular basis.
Wow. So you mentioned immigration, and we're now actually sort of living in a world where these barriers are going back up again against immigration.
Sadly.
And there is, it feels like there's a rise in anti-Semitism.
Well, it's not just feels like it, there is.
All right. How much does it worry you?
Well, it worries me because, you know, I went with a close friend of Simon Sharma, who's now a famous historian, Sir Simon Sharma. I went to school with him, we went to university together, and we visited in 1965, so just after the LBJ Goldwater election, which we visited in Atlantic City. Simon and I decided to look at the East, and this was when the wall was still up, and we went to Berlin, we went to Vienna, we went to Budapest, we went to Czechoslovakia as well, to Prague. And when we went to Prague, we visited Terezin. Terezin was a deportation camp. It wasn't a concentration camp. But Goebbels used it for propaganda purposes. He took the Red Cross there, I think it was in 1940, and it was, or 39, to demonstrate that the Germans weren't bent on the eradication of the Jewish race. And there's very famous pictures of the first courtyard that you walked into, you know, had Jews sort of doing gardening in a barber shop, in a shop. And as you went through the 4 courtyards, it got worse and worse. It was a deportation camp, but there was a gassing facility in the 4th courtyard where the railway lines were to take them off to the real concentration camps like Treblinka or whatever it happens to be, or Auschwitz or Dachau or whatever. And that made a searing impression on me. The really interesting thing was that in those days, those of you who go to Prague will know that I think there are 6 synagogues now that have been revamped, and it's an amazing thing to go and see. But in those days, in '65, all the paraphernalia from the synagogues there, from the 60s, were all heaped in one synagogue, where the Nazis had put them all together. And there was this famous collection of children's art from the concentration camps, or from the deportation camp outside Prague, and Theresienstadt. And the pictures were of 2 kinds. One was sort of heaven, you know, pictures of God, so fantasy, and one was a picture of pictures of reality, you know, Nazi guards, Alsatians, barbed wire, and all sorts of horrible things. So, and that made a searing impression both on Simon and myself. And so I've always been sort of very sensitive to that. And the answer to your question is I'm extremely worried about it. We see it in the Labour Party in the UK.
Yeah.
It's a really big issue there that has come to the fore. But we see examples of it, you know, prevalent in the whole of Europe. And it's born of this fear that we see around immigration and the like, the rise of technology, the squeezing of the middle class. I happen to think, I mean, this is, I think, an important point, that my view is that technology, particularly at the pace with which it is developing, will not provide the employment that we all hope it will. I mean, I know a number of people say we've always been faced with these sort of challenges.
Right.
If you read...
Do you think that phase is permanent or temporary, though?
Do I think the threat to employment is permanent or temporary?
So my understanding of this is that the technological change is displacing a lot of workers out of the...
I'm really worried about that.
And that might be a temporary phase until...
I don't think so. Well, I mean, there is an argument that, you know, it's a temporary phase, and then as these technologies develop and improve, or the impact is greater, that you bring further employment opportunities. I mean, it is true. You go back to 1929 and Keynes's general theory, and in the general theory, he posits that we will have more leisure time, that there will be less work available, and what we do is to take more holidays. That has not been proven to be the case. And I think it is a fundamental problem, and with that, the squeezing of the middle class. Monetary policy since 2008 has been, you know, close to zero interest. We've seen a rise in inequality because of that, those low interest rates. You know, the cost of capital has been extremely low. People have been developing very significant investments as a result of that monetary policy. That's caused tensions. And I think the technological fear, you see it here in America. You know, we talk to one another in a bubble on the East Coast and the West Coast. We talk to one another in the UK in a bubble in London. You know, that's why we miss out on the result of the Brexit referendum. That's why we miss out on the result of the first Trump election. And I think he would be re-elected. That would be my view.
He'll be re-elected, okay.
Yeah, I think, and we sort of miss these things. But the fundamental issue is around, you know, around these issues, I think, about employment, what's happening with technology, obviously the implications of immigration and the like.
Okay. How many times have you been to Burning Man?
3 times.
And what is the costume you wear when you're at Burning Man?
It has varied. It has varied. I won't admit to what it was. Well, no, they've been usually it's sort of black trousers and black shirt and black scarf.
Okay, usually. Just a man in black.
The man in black.
Why do you like it there?
Well, you know, it's really interesting because it epitomizes to me creative destruction. And you know, those of you who don't know what Burning Man is, it's 80,000 people in the desert, basically.
Does anyone here not know what Burning Man is?
Everybody.
Okay, everyone knows.
Well, it's
Smart audience.
It's a pop-up. It's a pop-up city. I think it takes a week or so to assemble. It's 80,000 people, you know, on the playa, and you know, a number of incredible exhibits are built, often in wood and then burnt. So what it symbolizes to me, and it symbolizes lots of things to people, some good, some not so good, but what it symbolizes to me, the ability of people to put together amazing exhibits, amazing artifacts, amazing pieces of art or sculpture, and in some cases, the case of the man itself on a Saturday night or the temple on the Sunday night. I mean, this year's temple was spectacular, and you know, the burn was incredible of the temple itself and the man on the previous day. And what it symbolizes to me is creative destruction. There's a strange sort of analogy, if you like, or not so strange analogy, between our industry, the advertising and marketing services industry, and what you see at Burning Man. You know, what has to happen is there has to be radical change in the industry. You know, some people refer to it as evolutionary. I don't think it's evolutionary. I think it's revolutionary. The pace at which it's happening is so intense and so quick that it's revolutionary change that is needed. And you know, that's one of the things that I experienced at WPP.
Could you not get that revolutionary change faster at WPP? It's so massive, how do you change it?
No, it's not a question about massive. And again, with all due respect, it's lazy journalism to say it's 400 companies. There weren't 400 companies there. There were 14 verticals. There were 14 verticals. And the question was, how could you consolidate those verticals in a meaningful way and an effective way? It is very difficult. I mean, last week we were doing our fundraising, and I went to see one investment institution. And I said, you know, when you have legacy business, it's like trying to weld 2 aircraft carriers together, as opposed to a motor torpedo boat. And the guy from the institution said to me that he claimed it was a Chinese proverb. I since checked, and it is not a Chinese proverb. But he said, when you put 2 dead birds together, you may have 4 wings, but it doesn't mean that you can fly. So I
feel like that should be a Chinese proverb.
It's so good it should be a Chinese proverb. So I think trying to make the change in a legacy industry, and this is not just the advertising and marketing service industry. Can you give me any industry where there is not significant technological disruption in manufacturing, in distribution, in marketing? And I can't think of one where that is not the case, where the technology is not sort of undermining traditional ways of doing things and thinking about things, and you're having to change very significantly in a very short period of time.
That's true, and that's actually a really good place to leave it. We're out of time.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you so much
for being so patient.
Thank you for being a good sport.
Please welcome back Nicholas Carlson.
Okay, all right. I have a very long speech to give. Just kidding. I would like to thank our sponsors. They are Deloitte Digital, Roku, Airtable, Pillsbury Law, Chartbeat. Yes, I agree with that. Microsoft News and Piano. And I would also like to thank all of you, the few, the hardy. You made it all the way through. Thank you very much, and see you next year. Thanks.